The boy's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pencil. 8 years old, bruises hidden under long sleeves in June. Writing dates in a notebook no child should ever need to keep. Times, places, words that made his stomach hurt to remember. Outside the diner window, thunder rolled across the Tennessee mountains. Not a storm. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. The leather-clad giant who walked through that door wasn't there to order coffee. And when little Eli Mercer whispered those 7 words, "My teacher hurts me every day," the biker's eyes went dead cold in a way that made hardened men look away. Because some monsters hide in classrooms, and some angels ride Harleys. If you want to see how a brotherhood of broken men took down a system that protected predators instead of children, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This story gets dark before it gets light. But I promise you, it's worth every second. The rain came down like nails against the cracked asphalt of Route 40, turning the 2-lane highway into a black mirror that reflected nothing but darkness. The kind of night where decent people stayed inside, doors locked, pretending the world beyond their windows didn't exist. Boone Ryder didn't have that luxury anymore. He sat alone at the corner booth of Molly's Diner, the only place still open past midnight in Hollow Creek, Tennessee. Population 3,200. The kind of town that looked peaceful in daylight and hollow after dark. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept the cup between his scarred hands anyway, staring at the black surface like it might show him something other than his own reflection. 43 years old, former Marine, dishonorably discharged for reasons he didn't talk about. 2 ex-wives who stopped calling. A daughter somewhere in Oregon who changed her number 3 years back. And a leather cut with the Iron Saints patch on the back. The only family that hadn't given up on him yet. The diner smelled like burnt coffee, grease, and decades of cigarette smoke that no amount of cleaning could erase. Molly herself had died 5 years ago, but her daughter kept the place running out of stubbornness more than profit. The neon sign outside buzzed and flickered, casting red and blue shadows across empty booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since 2003. Boone heard the motorcycle pull up before he saw it, a single headlight cutting through the rain. Not one of his brothers. The engine note was wrong. Newer, quieter. The kind of bike a weekend warrior rode to feel dangerous for a few hours before going home to a mortgage and a lawn that needed mowing. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. And then Boone saw the kid, 8 years old, maybe 9. Soaked to the bone despite the oversized hoodie pulled tight around his thin frame. Jeans torn at the knees, sneakers held together with duct tape, dark hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes, Christ, those eyes, that looked about 30 years too old for the face they sat in. The boy stood in the doorway, dripping water onto the checkered floors, staring at Boone with an expression that made something cold crawl up the biker's spine. Not fear, recognition, like the kid had been looking for him specifically. Behind the counter, Sarah, Molly's daughter, looked up from her phone with the exhausted expression of someone who'd given up being surprised by anything years ago. "Eli, honey, you're soaked. Where's your mom?" The boy didn't answer, didn't even look at her, just kept his eyes locked on Boone, water dripping from his sleeves onto the floor in a steady rhythm that sounded too much like a clock counting down. Boone felt his jaw tighten. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, to mind his own business, to finish his cold coffee and get back on the road before whatever this was became his problem. But he'd spent 20 years in the Marines learning to read danger, and another decade with the Iron Saints learning to read desperation. This kid was both. "You gonna stand there all night?" Boone's voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw from years of cigarettes and words he should have said, but never did. The boy flinched, but he didn't run. Instead, he walked forward with the careful, measured steps of someone who'd learned to move quietly through hostile territory. Each footfall deliberate, each breath controlled. Combat breathing, Boone realized with a sick twist in his gut. The kind of breathing you taught soldiers to keep them functional under fire. No 8-year-old should breathe like that. Eli stopped 3 feet from the booth, close enough to talk but far enough to run if he needed to. Smart kid, scared kid, broken kid, who'd learned the hard way that adults couldn't be trusted until they proved otherwise. "You're Iron Saints," the boy said quietly. Statement, not question. Boone's hand instinctively went to the patch on his chest, A winged skull wreathed in flames, the words Iron Saints MC curved above it in Gothic script. That bother you? No, Eli's voice was barely a whisper. My mom said bikers are dangerous. Your mom's right. Good. The boy reached into his hoodie pocket with movements so slow and careful they made Boone's teeth ache. I need someone dangerous. He pulled out a notebook, spiral bound, the kind you buy at a dollar store for back to school. The cover was water-stained and bent, held together with rubber bands. When Eli set it on the table between them, it landed with a sound too heavy for something that should have weighed nothing. Boone stared at it like it might explode. What is this? Eli's hands were shaking now, bad enough that he had to grip the edge of the table to keep them still. His sleeves rode up an inch. Just an inch. It was enough. Purple-black bruises ringed the boy's wrists like handcuffs, old ones fading to yellow, fresh ones still angry red. Finger marks. Adult-sized. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. My teacher, Eli whispered, and his voice cracked on the word like broken glass. Mr. Hale, he hurts me every day. Boone didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there with his hands around that cold coffee cup, staring at this kid who'd walked through the rain at midnight to tell a complete stranger the kind of truth that should have been told to police, to parents, to literally anyone but a washed-up biker with a dishonorable discharge and a list of regrets longer than the highway. You tell your mom? She doesn't believe me. No emotion in the words, just flat, dead acceptance. Says Mr. Hale is a good man, pillar of the community. Says I'm making it up for attention. You tell the police? Twice. Eli's jaw clenched. Deputy Ross said Mr. Hale's his fishing buddy. Told my mom I was troubled, that I needed discipline, not encouragement. Boone felt something dark and familiar unfold in his chest, the same feeling he'd had in Fallujah when they found what was left of the village elder who'd cooperated with them. The same feeling he'd had when his CO covered up what happened to the civilian contractor who'd gotten too curious about missing supply shipments. The feeling of watching systems protect themselves instead of the people they were supposed to serve. Why me? His voice was barely human now. Why walk into a diner at midnight and tell this to a stranger? Eli met his eyes, 8 years old, and he met them without flinching. Because my mom told me bikers are dangerous, the boy said quietly. And Mr. Hale told me nobody would believe a troubled kid over a respected teacher. His small hand moved to the notebook, fingers trembling. So I need someone dangerous, someone who doesn't care about being respected. The logic was airtight, terrifying, and absolutely devastating. This kid had figured out something most adults never learned, that sometimes the only people who can fight monsters are other monsters. I could be lying, Eli continued, and now his voice was shaking as hard as his hands. Could be making it all up. Could be exactly what they say I am. Troubled, attention-seeking, disturbed. He pushed the notebook closer. But I wrote it all down. Every time. Every date. Everything he said. Everything he did. A single tear tracked down his cheek, and he didn't bother wiping it away. And if you read it and still think I'm lying, then I'm out of options. Boone looked at the notebook, looked at the boy, looked at Sarah behind the counter, who'd gone very still and very quiet. Then he opened it. The first page was dated 4 months ago, September 15th. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. The letters formed with the painstaking precision of a child who'd been taught that neatness mattered. Mr. Hale kept me after class, said I failed the spelling test on purpose, made me write lines until my hand cramped. When I tried to stop, he grabbed my wrist. It hurt. He said pain helps us remember. Second page, September 22nd. Mr. Hale says I'm stupid, says my mom is stupid too, says that's why my dad left, made me stand in the corner during recess. When I cried, he said boys who cry deserve to be punished. Third page, September 29th. Mr. Hale locked me in the supply closet, said I needed to learn to control myself. It was dark. I counted to 1,000 3 times before he let me out. My throat hurt from screaming, but nobody came. Boone's hands had started to shake. He turned the page. October entries. November. December. Each one more detailed than the last. each one documenting systematic, calculated psychological torture dressed up as discipline, humiliation, isolation, physical intimidation that stopped just short of leaving visible marks in places that couldn't be hidden. And between the lines, in the careful documentation of dates and times and witnesses, a child teaching himself to build a legal case because no adult would do it for him. Jesus Christ, Boone whispered. There's more, Eli said quietly. Page 37. That's when it got worse. Boone didn't want to turn to page 37. Didn't want to know what worse meant. But his hands moved anyway, flipping through pages of careful third-grade handwriting until he found it. December 18th. Mr. Hale told me to stay after class again. This time he locked the door. He said I'd been bad. Said bad children need physical correction. He made me... Boone stopped reading. He'd seen combat. Seen things in Fallujah that woke him up screaming 15 years later. Seen what human beings were capable of doing to each other when they thought nobody was watching. But this was different. This was a child carefully documenting his own destruction because he'd figured out that survival meant evidence, and evidence meant writing down every detail of your own nightmare in neat, careful handwriting because messy handwriting might make people think you were lying. He closed the notebook with hands that wanted to put a fist through the nearest wall. How long has this been going on? Since September. Eli's voice was barely audible. But I think there were others before me. I heard Mr. Hale talking to Principal Vernon once. They were laughing about a kid who transferred last year. Said he'd been too soft. Said I was tougher. Boone looked up sharply. Principal Vernon knows? I think he's part of it. The boy's face had gone pale. Last month I tried to tell the school counselor, Mrs. Chen. She said she'd look into it. 3 days later, she transferred to a school in Memphis. Nobody's seen her since. The implications crashed through Boone's mind like dominoes falling. This wasn't one sick bastard. This was a system, a machine, built to identify vulnerable kids and grind them down while making sure nobody who might actually help could get close enough to see what was happening. Why now? Boone asked. Why come to me tonight? Eli's jaw clenched. Because tomorrow's Wednesday, and on Wednesdays Mr. Hale keeps me after class for private tutoring. The way he said private tutoring made Boone's blood run cold. He told me this week would be special, that I'd finally learn my lesson. The boy's eyes were bright with tears he refused to let fall. I don't want to learn any more lessons. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, thick and suffocating, pressing down on the diner like a physical weight. Boone stared at this kid who'd biked through a storm at midnight to ask a complete stranger for help because every legitimate authority had failed him. This kid who'd taught himself to document abuse like a crime scene investigator because he knew nobody would believe his word alone. This kid who'd looked at a room full of adults and correctly identified that the most dangerous-looking one was his only chance at safety. And Boone felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I believe you, he said quietly. Eli's breath caught. You do? Yeah. Boone picked up the notebook, handling it like the weapon it was. And I'm going to need you to be very specific about something. When you say Mr. Hale, are you talking about Marcus Hale? Teaches 4th grade? Yes. And Principal Vernon, first name Richard? Yes. Boone's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Because he knew those names. Everyone in Hollow Creek knew those names. Marcus Hale had been Teacher of the Year 3 years running. Richard Vernon sat on the town council. Both of them had families. Both of them went to Sunday services. Both of them had the kind of spotless reputations that made people uncomfortable when you asked too many questions, which meant this was going to get ugly. Who else knows you're here? Boone asked. Nobody? My mom thinks I'm asleep. I snuck out my window. Good. Boone pulled out his phone, an ancient flip phone held together with electrical tape. I'm calling my brothers. They're going to want to hear this. Your brothers? Eli's eyes went wide. The other bikers? Yeah, the other bikers. Boone's thumb hovered over the speed dial. You came to One Iron Saint asking for help, kid. That means you came to all of us. We don't do anything alone. He paused, making sure Eli understood what he was agreeing to. But you need to know something before I make this call. Once I do, there's no going back. We start digging into this. We don't stop until we hit bottom. And if you're telling the truth, and I think you are, then the bottom's going to be uglier than either of us wants to see." Eli didn't hesitate. "Call them." Boone dialed. It rang twice before a gravel, rough voice answered. "Boone? The hell you calling at 1 a.m? "Crow." Boone kept his eyes on Eli. "Wake up Ledger and Axe. Tell them to get to Molly's diner. Now." A pause. "We got a problem?" "Yeah." Boone's voice dropped to something that would have made hardened criminals nervous. "We got a problem, and it's the kind that's going to require all of us." "On our way." The line went dead. Boone set the phone down and looked at Sarah, who'd been standing behind the counter frozen in place for the last 10 minutes. "You hear all that?" She nodded slowly, her face pale. "You believe him?" Another nod. "My sister's kid goes to Hollow Creek Elementary. Came home last month with nightmares. Wouldn't talk about it. Just kept saying Mr. Hale was mean." Her voice shook. "I thought she was being dramatic." "She wasn't." Boone stood, his 6'3" frame unfolding from the booth like a threat taking physical form. "Make a fresh pot of coffee. Strong. We're going to be here a while." Eli watched him with wide eyes. "What happens now?" "Now?" Boone looked down at the boy, this small, broken, impossibly brave kid who'd walked through the rain at midnight because he'd run out of safe options and decided to gamble everything on dangerous ones. "Now you tell me everything, every detail, every name, every time someone should have helped and didn't. And when my brothers get here, you're going to tell them the same thing." "And then?" Boone's smile was the kind of thing that made grown men check the exits. "Then we go to war." The words hung in the air like a promise, or a threat, or both. Because that's what the Iron Saints were good at, existing in the space between protection and violence, between outlaws and guardians, between the people society had written off and the people society desperately needed when their own systems failed. Outside, the sound of motorcycles began to grow. Not one or two. More. The deep, throaty rumble of Harley engines that announced themselves like rolling thunder, getting closer with every second. Eli stood and walked to the window, pressing his small hand against the glass as headlights cut through the darkness. 1 bike, 2, 5, 10. More still coming, turning off the highway onto the road that led to Molly's diner, their lights forming a constellation of chrome and steel and defiance. "How many are coming?" the boy whispered. Boone stood beside him, watching his brothers arrive. "All of them." The first bike pulled into the parking lot. A murdered-out softail with ape hangers, and a rider who looked like he'd been carved from granite and bad decisions. That was Crow, the Iron Saints Sergeant-at-Arms, former Army Ranger. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan before an IED sent him home with a Purple Heart, and enough PTSD to drown a normal man. Second bike, Ledger, their accountant. White-collar criminal who'd done 6 years for exposing a corporation's pension fraud and decided prison gangs had better morals than Wall Street. Bald head covered in scars from a Shiv attack he'd barely survived. Numbers tattooed on his knuckles that told a story most people were too afraid to ask about. Third bike, Axe. Former firefighter. Lost his crew in a warehouse fire started by a landlord who'd bribed the inspector to ignore code violations. Found the landlord 3 days later. Nobody asked what condition he'd been in, but Axe joined the Iron Saints 2 weeks after that and hadn't touched a drop of alcohol since. More bikes kept coming. Ghost, their medic, former Army 68W who'd seen things in Mosul that made him stop believing in God but not in helping people. Wrench, their mechanic, autistic savant who could rebuild an engine blindfolded but couldn't handle crowds larger than 3. Smoke, their tracker, half Navajo, half Irish, all dangerous, with a criminal record that read like a highlight reel of jurisdictions that wanted him to stay the hell away. Every single one of them broken in different ways, every single one of them put back together wrong enough that they'd never fit normal society again, and every single one of them riding through the night because one of their brothers had called and said a kid needed help. They shut off their engines in near-perfect unison, the sudden silence more ominous than the noise had been. Leather creaked as they dismounted. Boots hit asphalt like hammer strikes. 13 men in total, moving toward the diner with the coordinated precision of a unit that had been through hell together and come out the other side welded into something unbreakable. Crow reached the door first, 6'5", 240, with a face that looked like it had lost arguments with brick walls and railroad ties. He scanned the diner, eyes moving past Boone, past Sarah, landing on Eli with the kind of tactical assessment that came from years of identifying threats and assets in hostile territory. "This the kid?" "Yeah." Boone's voice carried the weight of everything he'd just learned. "This is Eli." The other bikers filed in behind Crow, filling the small diner until there was no more room, until the air itself seemed compressed by the sheer presence of men who'd spent their lives on the wrong side of respectable and stopped caring what that meant. They looked like exactly what they were: criminals, outlaws, the kind of people parents warned their children about. And Eli looked up at them with something that might have been hope. Ledger moved first, pulling out a chair and sitting down with the careful, deliberate movements of a man who understood that sudden gestures frightened, traumatized kids. He had reading glasses in his pocket, put them on with hands that had strangled a man in prison for trying to hurt a kid during visitation. "Mind if I take a look at that notebook?" Eli glanced at Boone, who nodded. The boy slid the notebook across the table. Ledger opened it, started reading. His expression didn't change for the first page, or the second. But by page 5, his jaw had clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cables. By page 10, his hands were shaking. He closed the notebook very carefully and looked at Crow. "We're going to need to call church." "Figured." Crow's voice was flat. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm glad we brought everyone." Ledger took off his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, put them back on. "This isn't just abuse. This is systematic, organized. Multiple perpetrators, multiple victims, institutional cover-up." He paused. "And if this kid's documentation is accurate, and I think it is, we're looking at a conspiracy that goes all the way to the school board." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 20 degrees. Axe spoke up from near the window, his voice rough from years of smoke inhalation. "We talking about doing this official? Police? Lawyers? All that?" "We're talking about doing this right," Boone said. "Which means evidence, documentation, building a case that can't be ignored or buried or paid off." "And if that doesn't work?" Ghost asked quietly. He was the youngest of them, only 32, but his eyes looked ancient. Nobody answered, because everyone in that diner knew exactly what happened when legitimate channels failed. The Iron Saints didn't talk about those times. They just made sure the problems disappeared. "First things first," Crow said, taking command the way he always did when situations required leadership. "Kid, you're going to tell us everything, start to finish. Every name, every incident, every time someone failed you. Ledger's going to take notes. Ghost is going to check those bruises, make sure there's nothing that needs immediate medical attention, and the rest of us are going to figure out how to tear down whatever system let this happen." He paused. "That okay with you?" Eli nodded, his small voice steady, despite the tears now streaming down his face. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. I work for a living." Crow pulled up a chair, spun it around, and sat down with his arms crossed over the back. "Call me Crow. These ugly bastards," he gestured at the room, "have names too. You'll learn them. And you need to understand something before we start. Once you tell us this story, we own it. We carry it. And we don't stop carrying it until someone pays for what they did to you." His scarred face was impossible to read. "That's a burden you need to be willing to share, because telling us means you're trusting us not to fail you the way everyone else did. And that's a hell of a lot of trust to put in a bunch of criminals and outcasts." The boy looked around the room at the assembled bikers, at men with prison tattoos and knife scars and eyes that had seen too much darkness, at the kind of people his mother had warned him about, and he felt safer than he had in months. "I trust you," Eli whispered. "Then let's get to work." For the next 3 hours, the Iron Saints listened as an 8-year-old boy recounted 4 months of systematic abuse in excruciating detail. They didn't interrupt, didn't offer false comfort, just listened with the kind of focused attention that came from understanding that testimony was ammunition, and ammunition needed to be stored carefully. Ghost checked Eli's wrists, his ribs, the bruises on his shoulders, documented everything with a camera, taking photos with the clinical detachment of a field medic who'd learned to separate what he saw from what he felt, because feeling too much got soldiers killed. Ledger filled 3 notebooks with names, dates, patterns. His forensic accountant's brain was already building a case structure, identifying witnesses, establishing timelines, connecting dots that prosecutors would need to turn outrage into convictions. And Boone watched the kid's face, watched him relive every moment of trauma for an audience of strangers, watched him stay strong in a way that would have broken grown men. When Eli finally finished, when his voice gave out, and Sarah brought him a glass of water with shaking hands, the silence in the diner was the kind that preceded violence. Crow spoke first. All right, here's how this plays. Ledger, you're on paper trail. Financial records, personnel files, any complaints that got buried. I want to know who knew what and when. He pointed at Wrench. You're on tech. Emails, texts, anything digital these bastards thought was private. Find it. What if it's password protected? Wrench asked. Then get creative. Crow's smile was not friendly. Smoke, you're on surveillance. I want eyes on Hale and Vernon 24/7. If they so much as sneeze suspicious, I want to know about it. He turned to Ghost. You're on victim outreach. If there were other kids, we need to find them. Document everything. Make it so airtight that no lawyer, no judge, no bought-off cop can pretend this didn't happen. And me? Boone asked. Crow's eyes were cold. You're on the kid. He's your responsibility now. Where he goes, you go. Someone needs to make sure he's safe until this is over. Eli looked up at Boone with wide eyes. You're going to protect me? Yeah. Boone's voice was rough. I'm going to protect you. What about my mom? She'll notice I'm gone. We'll handle your mom, Ledger said quietly. Tomorrow morning, Sarah's going to call her. Tell her you came here scared and we're keeping you safe until the authorities can get involved. Give her a choice. She can believe her son and help us. Or she can keep denying it and we go forward anyway. She won't believe you. Then we'll make her believe. Crow stood, his massive frame unfolding like a threat taking shape. Because here's the thing about truth, kid. It doesn't need permission. It just needs someone willing to shout loud enough that ignoring it becomes impossible. The bikers started to move, each one heading toward their assigned tasks with the efficiency of a military unit deploying for combat. Engines roared to life outside. Chrome gleamed under the parking lot lights. And somewhere in the distance, Hollow Creek slept on, unaware that 13 men had just declared war on the systems designed to protect it. Boone stayed in the booth with Eli, watching the boy's eyes start to close despite his best efforts to stay awake. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion that went bone deep. You can sleep, Boone said quietly. I'll be right here. You promise? Eli's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, I promise. The boy's head drooped forward, then jerked back up. What if Mr. Hale finds out I told? He won't. Boone's voice carried absolute certainty. And if he does, he'll have to go through all of us first. Well, and that seemed to satisfy something in Eli, because his eyes finally closed and stayed closed. His breathing evened out, and for the first time in 4 months, he slept without nightmares. Boone sat there in the dim diner, watching this kid who'd trusted him with a burden no child should carry, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been broken for years starting to knit itself back together wrong, the way bones healed crooked when they didn't get set properly. His phone buzzed. Text from Crow. We got movement. Hale just left his house, 3 a.m., heading toward the school. Boone's jaw clenched. Follow him. Don't engage. Copy that. Another text, this one from Ledger. Found the financial records. You're not going to like what I'm seeing. Tell me. Settlement payments. 6 families over 5 years. Total $340,000. All signed NDAAs. All kids transferred to other schools. Boone's hands tightened around his phone hard enough to crack the screen. 6 families. 6 kids. 6 lives destroyed and then bought off to keep the machine running smoothly. And Eli would have been number 7 if he hadn't walked through that door tonight. His phone rang. Crow. Talk to me. Hale's at the school. Looks like he's burning something in the dumpster behind the gym. Crow's voice was tight with controlled rage. You want us to stop him? Boone looked at Eli, sleeping finally, peacefully, trusting that the monsters wouldn't come for him while the Iron Saints stood watch. No, he said quietly. Let him burn whatever he's burning, then photograph the ashes. I want evidence of destruction of evidence. You think like a lawyer. I think like someone who's seen good cases get thrown out on technicalities. Boone's voice dropped. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Because if we fuck this up, that kid right there pays the price. Understood. A pause. Boone? What he wrote in that notebook, the last few pages. I know. We can't let this go through official channels, not all of it. Some things need to be handled. I know, Boone repeated, his voice hard. But not yet. First we build the case, then we see what kind of justice the system provides. And if it fails, he didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Crow understood. They all did. Because every man wearing an Iron Saints patch had been failed by the system at some point. Every one of them had learned the hard way that sometimes the only justice you got was the justice you took. But that was a last resort. And Boone wasn't there yet. Outside, dawn was starting to break over Hollow Creek. Pink and gold lights spilling across the mountains, painting the world in colors that had no right to be that beautiful when there were children being hurt in classrooms and predators burning evidence in school dumpsters. Sarah brought more coffee, set it down without a word. She'd been crying. Boone could see the red around her eyes, but her hands were steady when she refilled his cup. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing him, for doing something. Don't thank me yet. Boone's voice was flat. We've barely started. But you started. That's more than anyone else did. She glanced at Eli, sleeping in the booth. My nephew, the one I mentioned, can I give Ledger his name? We'll look into it. She nodded, then walked back to the counter, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. By the time Eli woke up, it was full daylight and the diner was full of bikers drinking coffee and planning the systematic dismantling of a conspiracy that had flourished in the dark for at least 5 years. The boy blinked awake slowly, confused for a moment about where he was. Then memory hit, and his eyes went wide, searching for Boone. Still here, Boone said quietly. Told you I would be. Eli sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What happens now? Crow answered from across the room. Now, we go to war. And somewhere across town, in a house with a white picket fence and a minivan in the driveway, Marcus Hale washed the ash from his hands and told his sleeping wife he'd just been out for an early morning run, completely unaware that 13 men with nothing to lose had just made him their sole focus. The hunters had become the hunted. And the Iron Saints never lost their prey. The notebook contained more than dates and bruises. Page 43 held a list of 5 other names. Children who'd transferred suddenly, their families paid off, their stories buried. And Ledger had just found the bank records proving every word Eli had written was true. But there was something else in those financial documents. Something that connected the school's missing scholarship fund to offshore accounts. Something that made this about far more than one teacher and one principal. Something that meant the people protecting Marcus Hale had billions of reasons to keep him protected. The Iron Saints were about to kick a hornet's nest, and hornets with money were the most dangerous kind. The sun had been up for 3 hours when Boone's phone rang again. Ledger's voice came through tight and controlled, the way it always did when the numbers told a story nobody wanted to hear. We need to talk. All of us. Now. Boone looked at Eli, who was picking at a plate of eggs Sarah had brought him. The boy ate like someone who expected the food to be taken away at any moment. Quick, mechanical bites with his eyes constantly scanning the room for threats that weren't there anymore. Where? The clubhouse. And Boone? Ledger's voice dropped. Bring the kid. He needs to hear this too. That wasn't standard procedure. The Iron Saints kept civilians, especially kids, away from club business. The fact that Ledger wanted Eli there meant whatever he'd found was bad enough that keeping him in the dark would be more dangerous than the truth. On my way. Boone stood, his knees popping from sitting too long in the booth. Every year past 40 made itself known in the morning. Come on, kid, we're taking a ride. Eli's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Where? Somewhere safe. Boone pulled on his leather cut, the weight of it familiar as breathing. You ever been on a motorcycle? The boy shook his head. Well, you're about to learn. Boone held out his hand. You trust me? Eli stared at that scarred, calloused hand for a long moment. Then he set down his fork and took it. Outside, Boone's Harley sat alone in the parking lot, a 2003 Road King with more miles on it than most people drove in a lifetime. Matte black paint, ape hangers, exhaust pipes that rumbled like distant thunder even at idle. He pulled a spare helmet from the saddlebag. Too big for Eli, but it would have to do. This goes on your head. Keeps your brain from painting the pavement if things go wrong. Boone's tone was matter-of-fact. You're going to sit behind me, feet on the passenger pegs, arms around my waist, lean when I lean. Don't fight the bike. What if I fall off? Then I failed at my job. Boone swung his leg over the seat. And I don't fail. The engine started with a roar that made Eli flinch, but the boy climbed on anyway, small arms wrapping around Boone's midsection, holding on like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. They rolled out of the parking lot onto Route 40, morning sun cutting through the Tennessee mountains in shafts of gold that turned the asphalt into a ribbon of light. The wind was cold enough to sting, but Eli didn't let go. Just pressed himself against Boone's back and held on while the world blurred past at 60 miles an hour. The Iron Saints clubhouse sat 15 miles outside Hollow Creek, hidden down a dirt road most people didn't know existed. It had been a hunting lodge once, back when people still came to these mountains for recreation instead of meth and welfare checks. Now it was 3,000 square feet of weathered wood, broken windows replaced with plywood, and a yard full of motorcycles that represented more collective prison time than most gangs could claim. Home. Boone pulled in to find the entire club already assembled, 13 bikes parked in a semicircle around the entrance, 13 men standing in various states of exhaustion and anger, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee from mugs that advertised businesses that didn't exist anymore. They all turned when Boone's engine cut out. Crow moved first, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed the morning sunlight. Kid good? Kid's here. Boone helped Eli off the bike, kept one hand on his shoulder. Protective, possessive, mind to guard. What'd you find? Inside. Crow's expression was unreadable. And Boone, steel yourself. This is worse than we thought. The clubhouse interior smelled like old leather, cigarette smoke, and the particular kind of decay that came from men who'd given up on normal life and decided to build their own version from the wreckage. A long wooden table dominated the center room, scarred from years of fists, knives, and bottles slammed down during arguments that occasionally ended in blood. Ledger sat at the head of that table, laptop open in front of him, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. The others found seats, Wrench by the window, constantly checking his phone. Ghost near the door, medical bag at his feet like always. Smoke in the corner, watching everyone with eyes that missed nothing. Axe pacing, unable to sit still, hands clenching and unclenching like he was fighting the urge to hit something. Eli pressed closer to Boone's side. It's okay, Boone said quietly. These are my brothers. They're safe. They look angry. They are angry, but not at you. Ledger cleared his throat. Everyone sit. This is going to take a minute. They sat. All except Axe, who kept pacing, and Smoke, who preferred corners. Ledger turned his laptop around so everyone could see the screen. Spreadsheets, bank statements, transaction records that went back 6 years. Hollow Creek Elementary has a scholarship fund, Ledger began, his voice clinical. The Vernon T. Hale Memorial Scholarship, named after the principal's father, worth about $2.3 million, funded by donations from local businesses, alumni, and state grants. He tapped a key. Except the fund is empty. Has been for 3 years. Crow leaned forward. Someone stole it. Someone embezzled it, slowly, carefully. Small withdrawals disguised as administrative costs, facility improvements, educational materials. Ledger's jaw clenched. Amounts small enough that nobody questioned them. But over 6 years, they add up. How much? Boone asked. $1.8 million, give or take. The number hung in the air like smoke. Who took it? Ghost asked quietly. Ledger pulled up another document. That's where it gets complicated. The fund is managed by a board of trustees, 5 people, Principal Richard Vernon, Marcus Hale, representing the teaching staff, Susan Chen? Wait. Eli's small voice cut through the room. Mrs. Chen, the counselor who transferred. The same. Ledger's expression was grim. She's trustee number 3, trustee 4 is Deputy Ross, and trustee 5 is Mayor Dwight Tanner. Silence. Because that wasn't just corruption. That was a conspiracy that reached into every branch of authority in Hollow Creek. Jesus Christ, Crow breathed. The whole town's in on it. Not the whole town, but everyone with power to stop it. Ledger brought up more documents. The money was funneled through a series of shell companies, all of them incorporated in Delaware, all of them owned by a holding company called Shepherd's Trust, LLC. He paused. Which is owned by Vernon's wife. Boone felt something cold settle in his gut. They weren't just covering up abuse, they were profiting from it. Looks that way. Every time a family complained about their kid being hurt, Vernon would offer a settlement. Hush money. Paid out of the scholarship fund that was supposed to help vulnerable kids go to college. Ledger's voice was shaking now. They'd make the family sign an NDA, transfer the kid to another school and pocket the rest. Classic fraud with a side of child abuse. How many families? Boone asked. 6 confirmed. Could be more. Ledger pulled up a list of names. Sarah's nephew is on here. Jamie Chen. Transferred 2 years ago. Family got $60,000 to keep quiet. Eli was staring at the screen with wide eyes. Mrs. Chen knew? She knew what Mr. Hale was doing and she took money for it? Looks that way, kid. Ledger's voice softened. I'm sorry. The boy's face crumpled. Not crying, just breaking. The last adult he tried to trust had been part of the machine all along. Boone pulled Eli closer. Hey, look at me. The boy looked up with eyes that had aged another decade in the last 30 seconds. You did the right thing telling us. You understand? None of this is your fault, none of it. But Mrs. Chen was a coward and a criminal, and she's going to pay for what she did just like everyone else. Boone's voice was iron. But that doesn't change the fact that you were brave, that you survived, that you're still here. Eli nodded, but his small body was shaking. Axe stopped pacing. So what's the play? We take this to the FBI? And tell them what? Crow's voice was hard. That we broke into private financial records? That we've been conducting unauthorized surveillance? They'll bury us under federal charges before they even look at the evidence. Then we go public, Ghost suggested. Leak it to the media. Small-town media is in someone's pocket, Smoke said from his corner. His voice was quiet, but carried weight. Always is. They'll spin it. Make us look like criminals trying to frame upstanding citizens. We are criminals, Wrench pointed out, not looking up from his phone. Yeah, but we're criminals trying to help a kid. They're criminals who hurt kids. There's a difference. Try explaining that difference to a jury. The room descended into argument. Voices rising, frustration building, every solution met with a reason it wouldn't work. Every plan hitting a wall built by people with money, power, and a vested interest in keeping the truth buried. Boone watched his brothers tear themselves apart, trying to find a clean way to do a dirty thing, and he knew there wasn't one. Enough! His voice cut through the noise like a knife. Everyone shut up! They shut up. Boone stood, pulling Eli up with him. We're missing the obvious answer. We can't go to the police because they're compromised. Can't go to the media because they're controlled. Can't go to the FBI without admitting to felonies. He looked around the room at men who'd been through wars, prisons, and personal hells most people couldn't imagine. So we do what we always do. We make them come to us. How? Crow asked. We become the story. Boone's smile was dangerous. We make so much noise that ignoring us becomes impossible. We show up at town council meetings, school board hearings. We park 300 bikes outside City Hall and dare them to arrest us all. We force this into the light where they can't control the narrative. That's not a plan, Ledger said. That's chaos. Chaos works. Boone's voice was certain. They've been operating in the dark because darkness keeps them safe. So we burn the darkness down and see what crawls out. Crow rubbed his scarred jaw. You're talking about going to war with an entire power structure. Yeah. Could get ugly. It's already ugly. We're just making it visible. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of men considering violence they'd spent years trying to avoid. Finally, Ghost spoke up. I'm in. Me too, Axe said immediately. One by one, the others nodded. Ledger, Wrench, Smoke, all of them agreeing to put targets on their backs for a kid most of them had met 3 hours ago. Crow was last. He stared at Boone for a long moment, reading something in his brother's face that nobody else could see. "This is going to cost us," Crow said quietly. "Could cost us everything." "I know." "You really think it's worth it?" Boone looked down at Eli, at the small, broken kid who'd walked through the rain at midnight because every legitimate authority had failed him. This kid who'd documented his own abuse because he knew nobody would believe his word alone. This kid who'd looked at a room full of dangerous men and decided they were safer than the systems designed to protect him. "Yeah," Boone said. "It's worth it." Crow nodded slowly. "Then we ride." But before anyone could move, Wrench's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "We got a problem." Everyone turned. "What kind of problem?" Crow asked. Wrench turned his phone around. Security camera footage from the school, timestamped 2 hours ago. Marcus Hale entering the building with a duffel bag, leaving 10 minutes later without it. "He planted something," Smoke said immediately. "Drugs, weapons, something to discredit us when this goes public. Or something worse." Ghost's voice was tight. "What's in the building right now?" Wrench checked another camera feed. "Summer school program, about 40 kids." The temperature in the room dropped to Arctic. "He wouldn't," Ledger breathed. "Nobody's that fucking crazy." But Boone was already moving, grabbing his keys, his phone, his gun from the lockbox by the door. "Yes, he would. He knows we're coming for him, knows the evidence is there, so he's going to destroy it all, the school, the records, the witnesses." "Jesus Christ, he's going to blow up the school?" Axe's voice was horror. "Or burn it, or gas it, or any of 100 ways to make it look like an accident." Boone was at the door now, Eli still gripping his hand. "Wrench, call 911. Anonymous tip. Suspicious activity at the school. Get fire and police there now." "Police are compromised." "I don't care. Get bodies there. Enough people that Hale can't follow through without witnesses." "What are you going to do?" Crow asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm going to get those kids out." Boone looked at his sergeant at arms. "And I need brothers at my back." Crow's grin was savage. "You got 'em!" 13 engines roared to life in perfect unison. 13 men wearing leather cuts with patches that marked them as outlaws, mounted bikes that cost more than most people earned in a year. And 13 souls who'd been written off by society as too broken, too damaged, too dangerous to ever do anything worthwhile, pointed themselves toward Hollow Creek Elementary like a missile aimed at everything corrupt and evil hiding behind respectable facades. Boone rode point, Eli pressed against his back, the boy's small arms wrapped so tight around his waist it almost hurt. They hit 60 miles an hour on the 2-lane highway. 70, 80, chrome flashing in the morning sun like war banners, exhaust pipes snarling loud enough to wake the dead, a wall of leather and steel and controlled violence bearing down on a small Tennessee town that was about to learn what happened when you hurt children and thought nobody would care enough to fight back. The school came into view 3 minutes later, red brick, American flag out front, playground equipment in bright primary colors. Everything designed to look safe, wholesome, all-American. And in the parking lot, a single car, Marcus Hale's silver Honda Civic. Still there. Boone's blood went cold. Because if Hale was still in the building, that meant the device, if there was a device, hadn't gone off yet, which meant they had time. Or it meant they were already too late and about to ride straight into an explosion. Either way, Boone didn't slow down. The Iron Saints thundered into the parking lot in a formation that would have made their military backgrounds obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. Textbook assault pattern, bikes forming a perimeter, riders dismounting with the coordinated precision of a tactical unit. Crow and Smoke went left. Axe and Ghost went right. Ledger stayed with the bikes, phone already to his ear, coordinating with law enforcement, who may or may not be compromised. Boone headed straight for the front entrance with Eli on his heels because leaving the kid outside where Hale could grab him wasn't an option. The doors were locked. Boone's boot went through the glass without hesitation. Alarms screamed. Good. More noise meant more witnesses. Inside, the school smelled like floor wax, construction paper, and that particular scent all elementary schools shared. Crayons and fear and children's sweat. Summer school classrooms lined both sides of a long hallway. Bulletin boards covered in artwork. Lockers decorated with names. Everything normal. Everything wrong. Where's your classroom? Boone asked Eli, voice low. Second floor, room 214. They took the stairs two at a time, boots echoing on linoleum. Crow and the others were spreading out through the building, checking classrooms, evacuating confused teachers and terrified kids who didn't understand why scary men with tattoos were suddenly pulling them out of math lessons and art projects. Second floor hallway. Room 214 at the end, door closed. Boone tried the handle. Locked. He put his shoulder into it. The frame splintered but held. Second hit. Wood cracked. Third hit, and the door flew open, hanging crooked on destroyed hinges. Inside, Marcus Hale stood by his desk with a lighter in one hand and a gas can in the other. The classroom reeked of gasoline. Papers, books, file cabinets, everything soaked. Puddles on the floor reflecting fluorescent lights. Years of evidence about to go up in flames, along with probably the entire second floor. Hale turned slowly when he saw Boone, and smiled. "You must be the biker." Boone didn't answer. Just moved forward slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening despite every instinct screaming at him to put this predator through a wall. Because rushing a man holding fire next to enough accelerant to turn this room into an inferno would get everyone killed. "Eli told you, didn't he?" Hale's voice was conversational, like they were discussing the weather. "I knew he would eventually. He was always too brave for his own good." The lighter flicked on, flame dancing in the chemical-thick air. "Brave children make such entertaining projects." "Put the lighter down," Boone said quietly. "Or what? You'll call the police?" Hale laughed. "Half the police department gets Christmas bonuses from the fund. You'll call the school board? Vernon signs their paychecks. You'll call a lawyer?" He gestured around the soaked room. "All the evidence is about to become ash. There are kids in this building. Summer school lets out in 10 minutes. They'll be fine." Hale's smile widened. "Probably, if they move fast enough." Behind Boone, Eli made a small sound. Hale's eyes locked onto the boy, like a predator spotting prey. "Hello, Eli. Did you miss me? We have so much catching up to do." "Don't look at him," Boone said, his voice dropping into a register that made grown men nervous. "Don't talk to him. Don't even think about him." "Or what?" Hale held up the lighter. "You'll stop me? One step forward and I drop this. Whole room goes up. You, me, little Eli, all of us." Boone's mind raced through scenarios. Rush him. Room explodes. Back away. Hale drops the lighter anyway. Talk him down. Might buy time for Crow to get the kids out. "Why?" Boone asked. "Why hurt children?" "Why not?" Hale shrugged. "They're weak, controllable, and nobody believes them when they talk." His expression darkened. "Or they didn't until you came along. You and your criminal friends pretending to be heroes. You're not heroes. You're garbage. Outlaws. Felons. And when this is over, when I walk out of here, every cop in the state will be hunting you for breaking into a school with a child in tow." "Maybe." Boone took a slow breath. "But I'll still be alive. And you'll still be what you are." "Which is?" "A coward." Boone's voice was flat. "Hiding behind a lighter because you know the second you don't have leverage, I'm going to break every bone in your body." Hale's smile faltered. "That's what you are. A coward who hurts kids because adults scare you. A fraud who steals scholarship money because you're too pathetic to earn your own. A predator who only looks powerful when your victims are too small to fight back." Boone took one careful step forward. "And you're done." "I'm holding fire next to gasoline," Hale snarled. "I'm not done. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass, and smoke came through it like a nightmare made flesh, tackling Hale before the teacher could process what was happening. The lighter flew from his hand, tumbled through the air in slow motion. Boone lunged, caught it 6 inches from a puddle of gasoline. The flame went out. And Marcus Hale, teacher of the year, beloved educator, pillar of the community, found himself pinned to the floor by a half-Navajo biker with murder in his eyes, while 13 other bikers filled the doorway like a wall of leather and bad intentions. "Don't kill him," Boone said quietly. "He doesn't get to die. He gets to stand trial." Smoke's fist hovered over Hale's face, trembling with the effort of not following through. "Stand trial," Boone repeated. Smoke nodded, pulled back. Zip tied Hale's hands behind his back with the kind of efficiency that came from doing it 1,000 times. Outside, sirens, multiple vehicles, fire trucks, police cars, maybe even federal agents if Ledger had managed to get through. Crow appeared in the doorway. Building's clear. Every kid accounted for. Teachers are freaking out, but nobody's hurt. Good. Boone turned to Eli, who stood frozen by the door. You okay? The boy nodded mutely. You sure? I thought... Eli's voice cracked. I thought he was going to kill you. Takes more than a lighter to kill me, kid. Boone handed the extinguished lighter to Ghost. Evidence. Document everything. Ghost pulled out his camera. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Deputy Ross appeared, hand on his weapon, face red with exertion or rage or both. What the hell is going on here? Boone gestured at Hale zip-tied on the floor, at the gas-soaked room, at the window smoke had come through. Your fishing buddy just tried to burn down a school full of children. Ross's face went white. Because whatever he'd been paid to look the other way, attempted mass murder of children was a bridge too far even for a corrupt small-town deputy. He's lying, Hale said from the floor. They broke in, assaulted me, planted evidence. I was just here grading papers. In a room soaked with gasoline, Boone's voice was ice. With a lighter in your hand? More police arrived. Fire marshal. Someone in a suit who screamed federal agent. And outside, growing louder every second, the sound of more motorcycles. Not just the Iron Saints this time. Other clubs. Other brothers. Called in by Crow when it became clear this was bigger than one crew could handle. The Reaper's Legion from Memphis. The Fallen Angels from Knoxville. The Rogue Thunder from Nashville. Every outlaw MC within 300 miles, rolling in like an army. Because when one club called for help protecting kids, you dropped everything and rode. By the time they finished arriving, there were over 200 motorcycles filling the school parking lot, the street, the neighboring properties. 200 men in leather cuts standing between children and the people who'd failed them. And Hollow Creek, Tennessee, population 3,200, peaceful mountain town where nothing bad ever happened, realized that its secrets weren't secret anymore. The federal agent, FBI, by his badge, surveyed the scene with the expression of someone who'd just walked into a nightmare they'd have to explain in reports for the next year. Who's in charge here? Crow stepped forward. Depends on what you're asking. I'm asking who broke into this school. We did. Crow's voice was steady. Got a tip that someone was planning to destroy evidence of a conspiracy involving embezzlement, child abuse, and systematic corruption reaching into multiple branches of local government. Figured stopping a school from burning down was more important than a breaking and entering charge. The agent looked at Hale on the floor, at the gas can, at the room that reeked of accelerant. Jesus Christ, he breathed. Then louder. Someone get this man in custody. And somebody tell me why there are 200 bikers in this parking lot. Because one kid asked for help, Boone said quietly. And we don't fail kids. The agent stared at him for a long moment, then at Eli, standing small and scared, but still standing. That the kid? Yeah. He got a statement? He's got a notebook. Boone pulled it from his jacket, handed it over. 4 months of documentation. Dates, times, incidents. Plus we've got financial records showing embezzlement, witness testimony, photographic evidence of injuries, and about 6 other felonies I can document if you've got time. The agent took the notebook, opened it, started reading. His face went from skeptical to horrified in about 30 seconds. Who else knows about this? Every biker in that parking lot, every teacher in this building, and in about an hour, every news station in the state when the press conference starts. Boone's smile was sharp. We made it loud, like you do when you want to make sure nobody can bury the truth. The agent looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to assert authority, control the situation, do this by the book. But he was one man facing 200 bikers who just stopped a school from being burned down with children inside. Sometimes the book rewrote itself. All right, he said finally. Everyone stays put. Nobody leaves until we've taken statements. And someone please, for the love of God, tell those bikers outside to stop revving their engines. I can't think. Crow grinned. They're just celebrating, officer. We saved a school today. That's worth celebrating. Outside, chrome gleamed under the Tennessee sun. Engines rumbled like approving thunder, and somewhere in the crowd of leather and steel and men who'd given up on normal life, someone started a slow clap. It spread. 200 bikers applauding themselves for something most of them would have said was impossible 24 hours ago, protecting a child the system had abandoned. Boone felt Eli's small hand slip into his. "Are we safe now?" the boy whispered. Boone looked at Marcus Hale being dragged away in handcuffs, at Deputy Ross frantically making phone calls, probably to lawyers, at the federal agent reading that notebook with an expression that suggested multiple careers were about to end in disgrace. "Not yet," Boone said honestly. "We kicked the hornet's nest. Now we got to deal with the hornets. And kid, there's a lot of hornets." Because Vernon was still out there. The mayor. The school board. Everyone who'd profited from stolen scholarship money and buried complaints. And they had money, power, connections reaching into state government and beyond. The Iron Saints had motorcycles and felony records. It wasn't going to be a fair fight. But then again, Boone had stopped believing in fair fights around the same time he'd stopped believing in legitimate authority. His phone rang. Ledger. "Talk to me." "We got a bigger problem." Ledger's voice was tight. "I kept digging into those shell companies, found something you need to see. Something that makes the embezzlement look like small-time theft." "How much bigger?" "Multi-state bigger. Federal investigation bigger." A pause. "Boone, I think we just stumbled into something way beyond a corrupt school board. I think Hollow Creek is the tip of an iceberg, and whoever's running this operation has resources we can't fight." Boone looked at Eli, at this kid who'd trusted him, who'd given him a purpose when he'd been drifting toward another bottle, another highway, another year of running from memories that wouldn't stay buried. "Then we find someone who can," Boone said quietly. "Like who?" "I don't know yet." His grip tightened on Eli's hand. "But we didn't come this far to back down now." He hung up. The federal agent was walking toward him with the notebook in hand and an expression that suggested every word in it had been verified. "Mr. Ryder?" "Just Boone." "Boone, we need to talk privately." They stepped into an empty classroom. The agent closed the door. "This is real," he said without preamble. "All of it. The abuse, the embezzlement, the cover-up. And if what your friend found in the financial records is accurate, this connects to at least 6 other school districts in Tennessee and neighboring states." "How many kids?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds." The agent's face was grim. "Someone's been running this scam for years, finding vulnerable students, exploiting them, paying off families, and pocketing the difference. It's organized, sophisticated, and whoever's at the top has enough pull to keep local law enforcement compromised." "So what do you need from us?" "Everything you've got, documents, testimony, evidence, and—" He hesitated. "I need you to keep that kid safe, because the minute whoever's running this operation realizes how much he knows, he becomes a target. He's already a target. I'm talking about the kind of target that requires witness protection, federal safe house, new identity, the works." The agent met Boone's eyes. "And I'm not sure even that's enough to keep him alive once this goes public." Boone felt something cold settle in his chest, because he'd made Eli a promise. Protection, safety, justice. And now a federal agent was telling him that justice might require putting the kid in a cage, even a gilded one, for the rest of his childhood. There's got to be another way. Maybe. But until we arrest everyone involved, that boy is living evidence of a multi-million-dollar conspiracy, and dead witnesses can't testify. The agent paused. "I'm sorry. I know you've gotten attached, but keeping him alive matters more than keeping him comfortable." Outside, the bikers were still celebrating. Inside, Boone was realizing that winning the battle didn't mean winning the war, and some wars cost more than you could pay and still stay whole. He walked back into the hallway where Eli waited with Ghost standing guard. The boy looked up at him with eyes that had started to hope again. "What happens now?" Boone crouched down to his level. "Now we finish what we started. But it's going to get harder before it gets easier. You understand?" "I understand." Eli's voice was small but steady. "As long as you don't leave me." And that's when Boone realized the real point of no return wasn't breaking into the school or stopping Hale or calling in every MC in the state. It was this moment, this kid, this promise that couldn't be broken without destroying whatever was left of Boone's soul. I won't leave you, he said quietly. No matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets, I won't leave you. Eli threw his arms around Boone's neck. And outside, beneath the Tennessee sun, 200 bikers kept their engines running, a wall of chrome and leather, and broken men who'd found something worth protecting, even if protecting it cost them everything they had left. The federal agent's name was Carson. He'd been with the FBI for 16 years, worked organized crime in Chicago, human trafficking in Miami, and corruption cases that had put senators in prison. He'd seen things that would break normal people, but standing in that classroom with 200 bikers outside and a child who documented 4 months of systematic abuse, Carson looked like a man who just realized his next case was going to be a career ender one way or another. We need to move the boy, he said again, tonight, before word gets out that he's the primary witness. Boone's jaw clenched. He's not going into witness protection. He's 8 years old, which is exactly why he needs federal protection. Carson's voice was firm, but not unkind. Look, I get it. You made him a promise. You're trying to be the hero here, but heroes get kids killed when they put emotion ahead of strategy. Don't lecture me about strategy. Boone's voice dropped to something dangerous. I've got 13 brothers downstairs who'd die for this kid. That's more protection than any safe house can offer. Your brothers have criminal records, parole violations, outstanding warrants in some cases. Carson pulled out a tablet, started scrolling. Marcus Crowe. Aggravated assault, Dennis Ledger, securities fraud. James Ghost Morrison, possession with intent. You want me to keep going? He looked up. The second this goes to trial, defense attorneys will tear your credibility apart. They'll make the jury see violent criminals who coerced a troubled child into fabricating allegations against respected educators. We didn't coerce shit. The kid came to us and walked into a diner at midnight where a known felon happened to be sitting alone. Carson's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying a jury might not. And if we lose this case because your involvement tainted the evidence, every predator in that conspiracy walks free. The words hit like bullets. Boone looked at Eli, who was pressed against the wall listening to adults debate his future like he wasn't even there. The boy's face had gone blank again. Shut down. The same expression he'd worn in the diner before he decided to trust a stranger with his nightmare. Give us 24 hours, Boone said finally. Let me talk to my brothers. Figure out a plan that doesn't involve putting him in a cage. Carson hesitated, then nodded. 24 hours, but he doesn't leave your sight. And the second I think he's in danger, I'm pulling him. Federal authority supersedes whatever arrangement you think you have. Understood. They walked back into the hallway where Crowe was coordinating with the other club presidents. The Reaper's Legion sergeant-at-arms, a massive man named Gunner, was arguing with a Tennessee state trooper about parking violations while 40 of his brothers revved their engines in synchronized defiance. It would have been funny if everything wasn't falling apart. Crowe saw Boone's expression and knew immediately. How bad? Bad. They want to take him, put him in federal protection. Over my dead body. That's what I said. But Carson's not wrong. If we stay attached to this case, defense lawyers will use us to create reasonable doubt. Violent bikers coercing a child. Conspiracy to frame upstanding citizens. All the shit they'd need to poison a jury. Crowe's scarred face twisted. So what, we just hand him over? Let the system that failed him the first time take another shot at protecting him? I don't know. Boone's voice cracked. I don't have a fucking answer. Eli's small hand slipped into his. I don't want to leave. I know, kid. You promised you wouldn't leave me. I'm not leaving. They want to take you somewhere safe. I'm safe with you. The boy's voice was steady despite the tears starting to form. Please don't make me go with them. Please. Boone crouched down, eye level with Eli. Listen to me. I will do everything in my power to keep you with us. But if keeping you with us gets the people who hurt you set free, then I failed you worse than anyone. You understand? Eli shook his head. I don't care about them going to jail. I just want to be safe. And you will be, I promise. The words tasted like ash because Boone wasn't sure he could keep that promise anymore. Ledger appeared at the end of the hallway, moving fast. His face was pale. We need to talk. Now. All of us. They reconvened in an empty classroom away from the chaos. The Iron Saints' inner circle: Boone, Crow, Ledger, Ghost, Axe, and Smoke. Plus Eli, because secrets that affected his life weren't being kept from him anymore. Ledger opened his laptop with shaking hands. I kept digging into the shell companies, followed the money as far as I could trace it. He pulled up a network diagram that looked like a spider web. Shepherd's Trust LLC is owned by Vernon's wife, but she's just a name on paper. The actual capital comes from a parent company called Educational Futures Incorporated. EFI operates in 17 states. They run charter schools, tutoring services, scholarship programs. Let me guess, Crow said. All of them fronts for embezzlement. Worse, Ledger's voice was hollow. The embezzlement is just the funding mechanism. What they're actually doing is... He trailed off, like saying it out loud would make it too real. Spit it out, Boone growled. Ledger turned the laptop around. On the screen, photos. Dozens of them. Children, different ages, different schools, different states. All of them with the same haunted look in their eyes that Eli had. They're trafficking them, Ledger whispered. Not for money directly. For placement. Wealthy people who want kids but can't adopt through legitimate channels. People with records. People who failed background checks. EFI identifies vulnerable children, manufactures evidence of abuse or neglect in their home lives, gets them removed by social services, then funnels them to buyers through a network of corrupt family courts and private adoption agencies. The room went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Because they'd known it was bad. They'd known it was organized. But this was something else entirely. This was industrial-scale child trafficking hidden behind educational nonprofits and scholarship funds. How many? Ghost's voice was barely audible. I found documentation for 47 cases over 6 years, but if they're operating in 17 states... Ledger's hands were shaking badly now. Could be hundreds. Boone felt the floor tilt under his feet. Eli, did Hale or Vernon ever talk about sending you somewhere? A special school? A new program? The boy's face had gone white. Mrs. Chen said I might qualify for a residential academy for troubled children. She said it would be better than living with my mom, that I'd have structure, discipline, people who understood me. When did she say this? 2 weeks ago, right before she transferred. Boone's blood turned to ice, because if Eli had been marked for trafficking, if the only reason he wasn't already gone was because he'd walked into that diner and disrupted the timeline, then Carson was right about one thing. The boy was living evidence, and dead witnesses couldn't testify. We need to tell Carson, Ghost said. This is a federal trafficking, organized crime, way beyond our capability. No. Smoke spoke from the corner where he'd been silent until now. His voice carried the kind of certainty that made people listen. We tell Carson, and Eli becomes a federal witness, gets disappeared into the system for his own protection. And we all know what happens to witnesses in cases this big. They get protected, Axe argued. They get isolated, controlled, and when the people with money decide a witness is too dangerous, protection details develop mysterious failures. Smoke's dark eyes were hard. I've seen it. Watched it happen to my cousin who testified against a cartel. Had 4 U.S. Marshals guarding him. All of them found dead in a hotel room in Albuquerque. My cousin disappeared. Never found the body. So what's your suggestion? Crow asked. We hide him ourselves? We make him not worth killing. Smoke moved to the laptop, started typing. Right now, Eli's the primary witness. The smoking gun. But if we document everything, spread the evidence across multiple sources, make it so his testimony is corroborating instead of foundational, then killing him doesn't bury the case. Ledger caught on immediately. Redundancy. We find other victims. Other witnesses. Build a case so strong that Eli's part of a chorus instead of a solo voice. Exactly. That'll take time, Ghost pointed out. Weeks, maybe months. Where does he stay during all of that? With us, Boone said immediately. He stays with the club. We rotate protection detail. Never let him out of sight. The FBI won't allow that. Then we don't ask permission. Boone's voice was iron. Carson gave us 24 hours. We use it to disappear. Take Eli somewhere they can't find him while we build the case. That's kidnapping a federal witness, Axe said slowly. That's serious time if they catch us. They won't catch us, Crow's grin was savage. Because we're better at disappearing than they are at finding. The plan was insane, criminal, probably suicidal. Every man in that room knew it, and every one of them nodded anyway. Because sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same. And men like the Iron Saints had stopped caring about legal the moment legal failed to protect the people who needed it most. "We move tonight," Crow said, taking command. "Ghost, you coordinate with the other clubs. We're going to need safe houses, supply lines, people we can trust in other states. Ledger, you keep digging. Find every victim, every transaction, every piece of evidence that doesn't depend on Eli's testimony. Smoke, you're on counter surveillance. Make sure nobody's tracking us." "What about me?" Eli asked quietly. Crow looked at the boy. "You stay alive. That's your job. And you let us worry about the rest." They started to move, but Ledger held up a hand. "There's one more thing. Something I found in the financial records that doesn't make sense." "What?" "A series of payments from EFFE to a consulting firm called Blackridge Solutions. $200,000 a month for the last 3 years. I looked them up. They're not consultants." He paused. "They're a private military contractor, mostly ex-special forces. The kind of people you hire when you need problems to disappear permanently." The implications crashed through the room like a grenade. "They have soldiers," Ghost breathed. "Actual trained killers on payroll. And if they figure out we're a threat to $1 billion operation..." Axe didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because 13 bikers with criminal records and anger management issues were about to go up against professional mercenaries with unlimited funding and no conscience. It wasn't a fight. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Boone looked at Eli. At this kid who'd asked for help, who'd trusted him, who was now at the center of a conspiracy so big that people with military training were being paid 6 figures a month to protect it. He should have walked away. Should have handed the kid to Carson and let the FBI handle it. Should have gone back to riding highways and drinking away memories and pretending the world's darkness wasn't his problem. But Eli was looking at him with eyes that believed Boone could protect him from anything. And Boone had never been good at walking away from things that believed in him. "Then we get better," he said quietly. "We're outgunned, outmanned, and outfinanced. So we get smarter. We use what they don't expect: chaos, noise, the fact that nobody takes bikers seriously until we're already inside their perimeter." "That's not a plan," Ledger said. "That's suicide with extra steps. You got a better idea?" Silence. "Then we do this my way." Boone stood. "Crow, get everyone mounted up. We're leaving before Carson decides his 24 hours is negotiable. Ghost, call your contacts in the Appalachian charters. See if they've got a cabin we can use, somewhere off-grid, somewhere Blackridge can't find without local knowledge." "And what are you going to do?" Crow asked. Boone picked up Eli, settled him on his hip like the kid weighed nothing. "I'm going to keep my promise." They walked out of that school into afternoon sunlight that had no right to be that bright. The parking lot was still full of motorcycles. 200 bikers who'd shown up because one club asked for help. Most of them didn't know the full story yet. Didn't know about the trafficking ring or the mercenaries or the billion-dollar conspiracy. They just knew a kid needed protecting, and that was enough. Crow climbed onto the hood of a police cruiser, boots denting the metal. Someone handed him a megaphone that had probably been confiscated from a protest. "Brothers," he called out, voice carrying across the parking lot. "I need you to listen. What we thought was a local corruption case is actually national trafficking. The people behind it have money, power, and professional soldiers on payroll. They're going to come for this kid with everything they've got." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "So here's what I'm asking. You came here to protect a child. That mission just got a hell of a lot more dangerous. Anyone who wants out, right away now. No judgment, no shame. This isn't your fight unless you choose to make it yours." Nobody moved. Not one bike started. 200 men in leather cuts stood there in the Tennessee sun, and not one of them flinched. Gunner from the Reaper's Legion stepped forward. "What do you need? Safe houses, supply lines, eyes on highways between here and wherever we're going. And if shooting starts, I need brothers who know which end of a rifle to point." "You got it." Gunner turned to his club. "You heard the man. We're going to war." The Fallen Angels president, a wiry man named Preacher with a face like weathered leather, climbed off his bike. My uncle's got a compound in the Smokies, 20 acres, off the grid, solar power, well water, no records attached to any name the feds would recognize. That'll work. Crow looked around. Anyone else got resources? The Rogue Thunder road captain raised his hand. We got a network of safe stops between here and the Canadian border, underground railroad for people running from bad situations. We can move the kid north if needed. One by one, the clubs pledged support. Bikes, guns, money, manpower, everything they had, given freely to protect one 8-year-old boy most of them had never met. Because that's what outlaw culture was supposed to be before it got twisted by drugs and territory wars. Brothers protecting the vulnerable, communities taking care of their own when legitimate society failed them. Carson watched from the school entrance with an expression that cycled between impressed, horrified, and professionally obligated to stop this. He walked over to Boone. You're really doing this? Going on the run with a federal witness? Yeah. I could arrest you right now. All of you. You could try. Boone's voice was calm. But you've got 200 bikers who just declared war on a child trafficking ring. You really want to spend your resources arresting the people trying to help instead of the people who did this? Carson was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back, and handed it to Boone. This is my personal cell. When you find evidence, you send it to me. I'll build the federal case. But Boone? His voice dropped. The second that kid is in danger because of your pride, you call me. Because losing a witness is bad. Getting a child killed is something I can't live with. Neither can I. Boone pocketed the card, which is why we're going to make sure it doesn't happen. He carried Eli to his bike. The boy's arms wrapped around his neck, face pressed against Boone's shoulder. Are we running away? Eli whispered. We're getting you somewhere safe while my brothers burn down the people who hurt you. Boone settled him on the seat, helped him with the helmet. You scared? Yes. Good. Fear keeps you smart. Boone straddled the bike in front of him. But you're not alone. You got me. You got Crow and Ghost and Ledger and all the rest. And now you got 200 more brothers who'll ride through hell to keep you breathing. Why? Eli's voice was muffled by the helmet. Why do they care about me? Boone started the engine, let it rumble for a moment before answering. Because every man out here knows what it's like to be small and scared and abandoned by the people supposed to protect you. Every one of us has been failed by the system at some point, and we decided a long time ago that we'd never be the ones doing the failing. He kicked the bike into gear. 200 engines roared to life in response, and the Iron Saints led a convoy of outlaw motorcycle clubs out of Hollow Creek, Tennessee, with a federal witness clinging to their sergeant-at-arms and a billion-dollar conspiracy scrambling to figure out what the hell just happened to their perfectly organized machine. They rode north into the mountains as the sun started to set, chrome gleaming in the dying light, leather cuts snapping in the wind, the sound of 200 Harleys drowning out everything else until all that existed was the road, the brothers, and the mission. Preacher's uncle's compound turned out to be less of a compound and more of a fortified survivalist nightmare tucked into a valley so remote that GPS stopped working 2 miles out. 20 acres of forest, a main cabin with reinforced walls, 3 outbuildings, a shooting range, and enough weapons cached in hidden spots to fight a small war. The old man who owned it, everyone called him Colonel, though nobody knew if it was a real rank or nickname, took one look at Eli and disappeared into the main cabin. He came back 5 minutes later with a rifle. Nobody touches the kid, he said simply. Anyone comes for him goes through me first. Crow clasped his shoulder. Appreciate it. Don't appreciate it. Just keep that boy breathing. The colonel's eyes were hard. I got grandkids. Can't sleep at night knowing there's people out there stealing children for money. They set up a perimeter. Smoke and a few fallen angels took positions in the trees with hunting rifles and night vision scopes. Wrench started configuring motion sensors and cameras. Ghost turned one of the outbuildings into a medical station, and Ledger spread his laptop and documents across the main cabin's table, building a case with the kind of methodical precision that had once put white-collar criminals in federal prison. Eli sat in a corner wrapped in a blanket, watching grown men with tattoos and scars turn a remote cabin into a fortress designed around protecting him. Boone brought him soup from a can heated on the wood stove. You should eat. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Can't stay strong on an empty stomach. Eli took the bowl, stared at it. Boone? What happens if they find us? They won't. But what if they do? Boone crouched down, looked the kid in the eye. Then we fight. And we don't stop fighting until you're safe or we're dead. Those are the only two options. I don't want you to die because of me. Then stay alive, because that's the only thing that makes this worth it. Eli nodded slowly, started eating the soup in small mechanical bites. Outside, night had fallen completely. The Smokies were dark in a way cities never got. No light pollution, no ambient glow, just stars and shadows and the occasional gleam of a scope catching moonlight as perimeter guards rotated positions. Ledger called Boone over to the table. Found something, and you're not going to like it. Boone was getting tired of that phrase. Ledger pulled up an email. Encrypted, but he'd cracked it. The sender was listed as EFI Executive Director. The recipient, Blackridge Solutions Project Manager. The content made Boone's blood run cold. Subject: Hollow Creek exposure. The situation in Tennessee has become untenable. Local asset Hale compromised. Federal involvement confirmed. Primary witness, Subject E47, now under protection of Outlaw Motorcycle Organization. Recommend immediate extraction and permanent resolution. Authorization code, Shepard 6. Subject E47, Boone said slowly. That's Eli. Yeah. And permanent resolution is corporate speak for assassination. Ledger's face was grim. This was sent 4 hours ago, which means the motion sensors went off. Smoke's voice crackled over the radio. We got vehicles, 3 black SUVs approaching from the South Access Road. No headlights. Thermal signatures show at least 12 men. They're armed and moving tactical. Crow grabbed his rifle. How long? 5 minutes, maybe less. Shit. Crow looked at Boone. They found us already. How? Doesn't matter. Boone was already moving, grabbing Eli, pulling him toward the back of the cabin. We need to move. Now. But before they could reach the door, gunfire erupted outside. Not the sporadic shots of warning fire, the sustained professional suppression fire of trained soldiers executing an assault. Windows exploded inward, glass and bullets and chaos. Eli screamed. Boone threw himself over the boy, sheltering him with his body as rounds punched through the cabin walls like they were made of paper instead of reinforced timber. Ghost returned fire from the doorway, his rifle barking 3-round bursts. Outside, someone screamed, 1 down, but there were 11 more, and the Iron Saints had maybe 20 brothers in fighting positions spread across 20 acres, against professional mercenaries with military-grade weapons and night vision equipment. Fall back to the bunker, the colonel shouted. Everyone fall back! Boone didn't know what bunker he meant until the old man kicked aside a rug and revealed a trap door. Underground, leads to a tunnel, comes out half a mile north near the creek. The colonel was bleeding from his shoulder, but his hands were steady as he hauled the door open. Get the kid out of here! Crow grabbed Ledger's laptop, shoved it in a backpack. Everyone in, now! Ghost went first, rifle leading. Then Eli, shaking so hard he could barely climb down the ladder. Boone followed, and Crow after him. The colonel stayed above. Wait, Boone called up. You're coming too. Someone's got to hold them off. Give you time to run. The old man smiled. It was the kind of smile that said goodbye. Besides, I'm old. Been waiting for a good fight to die in. Colonel, take care of that boy, you hear me? Don't let him end up like my grandkids did. And then he slammed the trapdoor shut. The lock engaged from above. In the darkness of the bunker, they heard the colonel's rifle open up, heard him shouting challenges at the mercenaries, heard the sustained fire that followed, and then silence. Move, Crow's voice was hoarse. We keep moving or he died for nothing. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and smelled like earth and decay. They crawled through it single file, Ghost's tactical light the only illumination. Every few seconds, muffled gunfire echoed from above. Brothers dying. Men who'd shown up to protect a kid they'd never met, bleeding out in a Tennessee forest while mercenaries hunted them like animals. Eli was crying silently. Boone could feel the boy's body shaking against his back. Almost there, Ghost whispered from up front. I can see the exit. They emerged into cold mountain air near a creek that rushed over rocks with a sound like static. Behind them, the compound was lit up by muzzle flashes. The gunfire had decreased in frequency. That wasn't a good sign. "Bikes are hidden 2 miles west," Smoke's voice came over the radio. He'd made it out. "Rally Point Alpha, move fast." They moved. Through forest so dark, Boone couldn't see his hand in front of his face, stumbling over roots and rocks. Eli on Boone's back now, arms locked around his neck, legs wrapped around his waist. Behind them, the gunfire stopped completely. That was an even worse sign. They reached the bikes, a small cache of 5 motorcycles hidden under camouflage netting. Smoke was already there, blood running from a gash on his forehead. "Where's everyone else?" Crow demanded. "Dead or captured. We're it." Smoke's voice was flat. Axe went down covering the perimeter. Wrench took a round through the chest. The colonel held them off until we got clear. 5 men left, out of 20 who'd been at the compound. 15 brothers dead or captured because Boone had thought he could protect one kid from a billion-dollar conspiracy. "We need to move," Ghost said. "They'll have tracker dogs, drones. They'll sweep this entire mountain." "Where do we go?" Ledger asked. "They found us here. They'll find us anywhere." Boone looked at Eli, at the boy's tear-streaked face, at eyes that had seen too much violence in one night, and he realized Carson had been right. The Iron Saints couldn't protect Eli. Not from this. Not from trained mercenaries with unlimited resources and authorization to kill. All they could do was run. And running only worked until you got tired. His phone rang. "Carson." Boone answered. "How'd you get this number?" "I've been tracking your movements. Saw the assault on thermal satellite. 15 heat signatures went cold in the last 30 minutes. Carson's voice was tight. "Boone, I know you're trying to protect him, but you're getting people killed. Your people. This has to stop." "I know." "Then bring him in. Let us protect him properly. They found us in the middle of nowhere. How long before they find your safe house? How long before your protection detail develops a mysterious failure?" Boone's voice cracked. "At least with us, he knows who's trying to kill him. With you, he's got 5 exhausted bikers against a professional kill team." Carson paused. "There's another option. One I didn't want to use because it means giving up control. But if you're willing to trust me, really trust me, I might have a way to keep him safe." "What way?" "I can't tell you over the phone, but it involves people even Black Ridge Solutions can't touch. People who specialize in making witnesses disappear so completely that billion-dollar conspiracies give up looking." Another pause. "But Boone, if you do this, you don't get to know where he goes. Don't get to check on him. Don't get to know if he's okay. He just vanishes. And you have to trust that he's safer invisible than he ever was with you." Boone looked at Eli. The boy was staring back with eyes that said, "Don't leave me." Every instinct screamed at Boone to say no, to keep the kid close, to die protecting him if that's what it took. But 15 men had already died tonight, and Eli was still in danger. "I need to talk to him first," Boone said quietly. "You've got 10 minutes before that kill team sweeps your position. Make them count." The line went dead. Boone walked a few steps away with Eli, crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Kid, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." Eli's lip trembled. "You're sending me away. I'm trying to keep you alive." Boone's voice broke. "Those men who attacked us tonight? They're professionals, trained killers, and they're not going to stop until you're dead or they are. And I can't protect you from that. Nobody can." "Yes, you can. You promised." "I know I did, and I've been trying. But Eli, 15 men died tonight because I was too proud to admit I couldn't keep that promise." Tears were streaming down Boone's face now. "I can't lose anyone else, and I can't watch you die because I was too stubborn to let you go somewhere actually safe." "Where?" "I don't know, and that's the point. Nobody can tell what they don't know, not even me." Boone pulled the boy into a hug. "But the people who'll take you, they're good at making witnesses disappear. And once you're gone, once the people trying to kill you can't find you, they'll give up. Move on to easier targets, and you'll be safe." "For how long?" "Until it's over. Until everyone involved in this trafficking ring is in prison or dead. However long that takes." And then I can come back? Find you? Boone wanted to say yes, wanted to promise they'd see each other again. But he'd made too many promises he couldn't keep already. Maybe, he said instead. But maybe by then you'll have a new life, new family, and you won't want to come back to a washed-up biker who got your friends killed. You're not washed up, and you didn't get them killed. They chose to fight. Eli's voice was small but steady. Ghost told me. He said every man out here had been failed by the system, that protecting me was their way of protecting the kids they used to be, that it wasn't about me specifically, it was about what I represented. Ghost talks too much. He's right, though, isn't he? Boone nodded slowly. Yeah, he's right. Then they didn't die for nothing. They died making sure what happened to them doesn't keep happening to other kids. Eli wiped his eyes. And if I have to disappear to make that mean something, then I'll disappear. Boone stared at this 8-year-old kid who'd somehow become wiser than every adult around him. You're going to be okay, Boone whispered. You're going to survive this, build a good life. And someday when you're old enough to understand, you'll realize that the bravest thing you ever did was trust dangerous men to do the right thing. I already understand. Eli hugged him one more time. Thank you for believing me. Nobody else did. I'll always believe you. Boone pulled back, looked at those eyes one last time. And if you ever need me, if you're ever in trouble again, you find a way to get word to the Iron Saints. We'll come. I promise you that. Eli nodded. Boone called Carson back. Where do we meet? There's a gas station 20 miles south. I'll have people there in 30 minutes. You bring the boy. You leave everything else behind. Phones, wallets, anything that can be traced. He gets in a car with strangers and you never see him again. Carson's voice softened. I'm sorry, Boone. I know this isn't what you wanted. Nothing about this is what I wanted. Boone looked at his brothers, at 4 exhausted, bleeding men who'd given everything to protect a kid. But it's what he needs. So we do it. They rode south in silence. 5 bikes running dark, no headlights, using moonlight and memory to navigate mountain roads. Eli pressed against Boone's back one last time, arms wrapped tight, memorizing the sound of a Harley engine and the smell of leather and cigarette smoke. The gas station was closed, had been for years by the look of it, but 3 black sedans sat in the lot, and a woman in a business suit stood next to them with the kind of posture that screamed federal agent. Boone pulled to a stop 20 feet away, didn't shut off his engine. Crow and the others formed a semicircle, hands near weapons, ready to turn this into a bloodbath if it smelled like a trap. The woman walked forward slowly, hands visible. I'm Deputy Director Patricia Vance, FBI Witness Protection. She looked at Eli. You're a very brave boy, and I'm going to make sure you stay safe. How? Boone demanded. By erasing him. New name, new family, new life. We've already got a placement lined up with a couple in Oregon who've been vetted and cleared. They're good people. They'll take care of him. Oregon, Eli whispered. That's far. That's the point. Vance's expression softened. The farther you are from here, the safer you'll be. Well, Boone helped Eli off the bike. The boy's legs were shaky. You got everything you need? Boone asked. Eli patted his pockets, pulled out the worn notebook that started all of this. I want you to have it, the boy said, holding it out. Use it to finish what we started. Make sure everyone knows the truth. Boone took the notebook. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I will. I promise. Another promise you might not keep? No. Boone's voice was iron. This one I'll keep, because 15 men died to give us the evidence to take these bastards down, and I'm not letting that be for nothing. Eli smiled. Small and sad and far too old for an 8-year-old. Then he walked to Deputy Director Vance and climbed into the sedan without looking back. Because looking back would have broken him, and he'd been broken enough already. The sedan pulled away, disappeared into the darkness, and Boone stood there in an abandoned gas station parking lot, holding a notebook full of pain while his brothers watched in silence. What now? Ghost asked quietly. Boone opened the notebook, turned to the last page. Eli had written something new, recent. The ink was still wet. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't be sad. Be angry. Use that anger to burn them down. All of them. Every person who hurt kids and thought they'd get away with it. Make them pay. Not for me. For everyone. And Boone? Thank you for keeping your promise. You didn't leave me. You saved me. There's a difference. Your brother Eli Boone closed the notebook carefully. Then he looked at his 4 remaining brothers, Crow, Ledger, Ghost, and Smoke, and saw the same expression on every face: rage, cold, calculated, absolute. Ledger, Boone said quietly, you said EFI operates in 17 states. How many victims did you identify? 47 confirmed. Probably 3 times that many we haven't found yet. Find them. Document everything. Build a case so airtight that no lawyer, no judge, no bought politician can make it go away. That'll take months. Then we've got months. Boone climbed back on his bike. Ghost, call every charter, every brother, every club we know. Tell them what happened here. Tell them we're going to war with a child trafficking ring. Tell them we need soldiers. How many? All of them. Smoke pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. And what are you going to do? Boone started his engine. The Harley roared to life, loud and angry and hungry for violence. I'm going to find out who runs Educational Futures Incorporated. Find out who signs the checks for Blackridge Solutions. Find out every name, every face, every person who profited from stealing children. His voice dropped to something inhuman. And then I'm going to make them understand that some sins don't get forgiven. They get punished. By men who've got nothing left to lose and every reason to make sure justice gets served even if the law won't do it. That's not justice, Crow said. That's revenge. Good. Boone's smile was the kind of thing that made predators nervous. Because I'm done trying to do this the right way. The right way got 15 brothers killed and 1 kid sent into hiding. So now we do it my way. And my way ends with everyone responsible either in prison or in the ground. He twisted the throttle. The Harley screamed. And somewhere in the Tennessee mountains, 4 men who'd been outlaws and criminals and society's rejects transformed into something far more dangerous. Avenging angels on motorcycles. Silent protectors who'd failed to protect. Broken men with nothing left to lose and a debt to pay in blood. The war had just begun. And this time, the Iron Saints weren't fighting to save 1 kid. They were fighting to make sure what happened to Eli never happened to anyone else. No matter how many bodies it took, no matter how many laws they broke, no matter how many monsters they had to become to kill the monsters hiding behind respectable facades. The Iron Saints spent 3 days in a garage outside Knoxville that smelled like motor oil, gunpowder, and the particular kind of desperation that came from planning a war you probably wouldn't survive. Ledger had transformed one wall into a conspiracy board that looked like something from a federal task force. Photos, documents, string connecting names and faces and corporations. Educational Futures Incorporated sat at the center like a spider in a web, threads reaching into 17 states, touching 47 documented victims, and probably 3 times that many they hadn't found yet. But it was the faces at the top that made Boone's hand shake every time he looked at them. Dr. Patricia Whitmore, CEO of Educational Futures Incorporated, former child psychologist, published author on childhood trauma, guest speaker at conferences about protecting vulnerable youth, and the architect of a trafficking operation that had stolen over 100 children in 6 years. Next to her photo, Gerald Whitmore, her husband, founder of Blackridge Solutions, former Delta Force, the kind of man who'd spent 20 years learning how to kill people efficiently and then turned that knowledge into a business model. They weren't just criminals. They were professionals who'd weaponized the very systems designed to protect children. Found the money trail, Ledger said, not looking up from his laptop. He'd been working for 72 hours straight, fueled by coffee and rage. Whitmore uses EFI scholarship funds to identify vulnerable kids, pays social workers, teachers, counselors to flag potential targets, then manufactures evidence of abuse or neglect in the home, gets the kids removed by child services, funnels them to buyers through a network of private adoption agencies she owns. How much per kid? Ghost asked quietly. Depends on age, health, appearance. Anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000. She's grossed at least $12 million over 6 years. Ledger's voice was hollow. And that's just what I can trace. Actual numbers probably double. Crow was cleaning a rifle that had seen action in 3 different wars. His hands moved with the kind of automatic precision that came from muscle memory older than conscious thought. We got addresses? Main office in Nashville. Whitmore's personal residence in Franklin, plus a ranch in Montana where they do the actual transfers. Remote location, private airstrip, armed security. How many guards? 12 on rotation, all former special forces, all on Black Ridge payroll. Ledger pulled up security camera footage he'd hacked from the ranch's system. And they're not mall cops. These guys know what they're doing. Smoke had been silent for hours, just watching the conspiracy board with eyes that saw patterns most people missed. Finally, he spoke. It's a fortress. Can't assault it directly without getting slaughtered. Then we don't assault it directly, Boone said. We make them come to us. Everyone turned. How? Crow asked. We take the one thing they can't afford to lose. The records, the evidence, the documentation of every transaction, every victim, every buyer. Boone pointed at the Nashville office on the map. It's all stored there, digital and physical. If we get it, we can prove everything. But more importantly, if they think we got it, they'll come after us with everything they have. That's suicide, Ghost said flatly. We're 5 men. They've got dozens of trained soldiers. Which is why we're not doing this alone. Boone pulled out his phone, started making calls. Every club within 500 miles owes us favors. Time to collect. The response came faster than anyone expected. Reaper's Legion from Memphis, 23 men. Fallen Angels from Knoxville, 18 men. Rogue Thunder from Nashville, 31 men. The Devil's Backbone from Atlanta, 40 men. And a dozen smaller chapters, independent writers, 1%ers who'd heard what happened at the compound and decided some causes were worth dying for. By the time they finished gathering, there were over 200 motorcycles parked in an abandoned quarry outside Nashville. 200 men in leather cuts, carrying weapons that ranged from hunting rifles to military-grade hardware, acquired through channels nobody asked about. The largest gathering of outlaw motorcycle clubs in Tennessee history. And they were about to rob a child trafficking organization. Crow stood on a flatbed truck, addressing the assembled riders while the sun set behind the Nashville skyline. His voice carried across the quarry without a megaphone, raw and rough from years of cigarettes and screaming orders under fire. Most of you know why you're here. Those who don't, listen close. Educational Futures Incorporated is a front for child trafficking. They've stolen over 100 kids in 6 years, sold them to buyers who failed background checks, who had records, who wanted children for reasons that make your stomach turn. He paused. 15 of our brothers died 3 days ago trying to protect one kid from their kill squad. Tonight, we make sure those 15 didn't die for nothing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The target is their Nashville office. 10 stories, corporate security, cameras, armed guards. Everything they need to look legitimate while hiding evidence of crimes that should get them all executed. Crow's voice hardened. We're going in at midnight, we're getting those records, and we're burning that building to the ground on our way out. What about cops? Someone shouted from the crowd. Let them come. We'll be gone before they get organized. And if they try to stop us, they'll have to arrest 200 bikers simultaneously. Good luck with that. What about Black Ridge? Another voice. Their kill squad? They'll be there, probably waiting for us. Which is why this is a volunteer mission. Anyone who doesn't want to risk dying tonight, ride away now. No shame, no judgment. Nobody moved. Not one bike started. 200 men stood there in the fading light, and every single one of them knew they might not see tomorrow. But they'd made their choice, because some things were worth dying for. And protecting kids from predators was at the top of that list. Boone spent the next 2 hours going over the plan with team leaders. Ghost would take medical and establish a triage point 2 blocks away. Smoke would handle counter-surveillance, making sure they knew when law enforcement was coming. Ledger would crack their servers and download everything while the rest provided security. It was a terrible plan with 1,000 ways to fail, but it was the only plan they had. At 11:47 p.m., 200 motorcycles rolled into downtown Nashville like an invading army. Chrome gleaming under streetlights, exhaust pipes snarling loud enough to set off car alarms, leather cuts marking them as outlaws, criminals, 1%ers who'd given up on society's rules. The Educational Futures Incorporated building sat on Fifth Avenue. Modern glass and steel. 10 stories of respectable corporate facade. Lights on in the upper floors where someone was working late. Or waiting. Crow gave the signal. 50 bikers peeled off to establish perimeter. Another 50 dismounted and moved toward the building with the coordinated precision of a military unit. The rest stayed with the bikes, engines idling, ready to provide cover fire or evacuation depending on how bad things got. Boone led the entry team, Crow on his left, Ledger behind with a laptop bag. Smoke ranging ahead, checking corners, windows, ambush points. The front doors were glass, reinforced, but glass nonetheless. Axe. No, Axe was dead. Gunner from the Reaper's Legion stepped up with a sledgehammer and put it through the door in one swing. Glass exploded inward in a shower that sounded like crystal rain. Alarm screamed. Good. The louder, the better. Inside, the lobby was all marble and modern art, and the kind of corporate sterility that probably cost more than most of these bikers made in a year. A security desk sat empty. Elevator banks on the far wall. Stairwell access behind a locked door. Stairs, Crow ordered. Elevators are kill boxes. Smoke kicked the stairwell door off its hinges. They moved up fast, boots echoing in the concrete shaft. 10 floors. 20 flights of stairs. Men in their 40s and 50s breathing hard by floor 5, but nobody stopped. Floor 7. Nothing. Floor 8. Still clear. Floor 9. Gunfire erupted from above. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. Bullets sparking off metal railings. Someone screamed. One of the fallen angels went down, clutching his leg. Suppressing fire! Crow roared. 20 rifles opened up simultaneously. The enclosed stairwell turned the sound into something that felt like it might collapse your lungs. Spent brass rained down like hail. Above them, the Black Ridge team retreated. They'd expected resistance. They hadn't expected 200 angry bikers willing to storm a building under fire. Ghost stayed with the wounded man. Everyone else kept climbing. 10th floor. The door had been barricaded from inside. Steel desk, filing cabinets, everything office furniture could provide for a hasty defensive position. Breaching charge, someone called. 30 seconds later, the door exploded inward, and they poured through into a corporate office space that looked like a war zone. Desks overturned, papers everywhere. And at the far end, behind a makeshift barricade, 6 men in tactical gear with automatic weapons. Professional soldiers who'd been paid to protect a child trafficking operation. The firefight lasted maybe 90 seconds. Felt like 90 hours. Bullets punched through drywall, shattered computer monitors, turned expensive office furniture into splinters. The air filled with smoke and the copper smell of blood and the sound of men screaming in languages that ranged from English to Spanish to whatever Afghan dialect some of these Black Ridge contractors had picked up overseas. When it ended, 3 bikers were down and all 6 Black Ridge soldiers were dead or dying. Boone checked each body with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen too much death to be shocked by it anymore. Confirmed kills. No wounded to secure. No one left to fight. Clear, he called out. Crow was already pulling wounded behind cover. Ghost, we need medical up here now. On my way. Ledger ran to the server room, started pulling cables, connecting his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with the kind of speed that came from years of financial crime and data theft. How long? Boone asked. 5 minutes for a full download, maybe less if I just grab the important files. Take 3 minutes. We don't have 5. Because outside sirens were approaching. Lots of them. Metro police. Maybe state troopers. Possibly federal agents if Carson had been monitoring the situation. And somewhere out there, the rest of Black Ridge Solutions was mobilizing. Smoke's voice crackled over the radio. We got company. 2 vehicles approaching from the south. Black SUVs. Same type that hit the compound. How many? Can't tell. Windows are tinted, but if it's a full kill squad, we're looking at 12 to 15 operators. Boone did the math. They'd already lost 3 men up here. Ghost was with wounded. That left maybe 40 able-bodied fighters spread across 10 floors. Against professional mercenaries with military training. Everyone to defensive positions, Crow ordered. Stairwells, elevator banks. Anyone comes through those doors who isn't wearing our colors, you put them down. The bikers moved, not with the polished efficiency of soldiers, but with the determined brutality of men who'd been in enough bar fights, prison riots, and gang wars to know how to hold ground. Ledger's laptop beeped. Got it. Everything. Financial records, victim files, buyer information, names, addresses, payment receipts, enough to put 100 people in prison. Download it to 3 different drives, Boone said. We lose one, we've still got backup. Already doing it. The SUVs pulled up outside. Doors opened. Men poured out in tactical formation. But they didn't breach immediately. That was wrong. Professional soldiers always pressed an advantage, hit fast before defenders could organize. Unless they were waiting for something. Smoke, Boone said into the radio. What are they doing? Nothing. They're just standing there, like they're waiting. Waiting for what? His answer came in the form of a voice over a bullhorn from street level. Iron Saints. This is Gerald Whitmore, CEO of Blackridge Solutions. You're surrounded. Nashville Metro has blocked off a 6-block radius. FBI is en route. You have nowhere to run. Boone moved to a shattered window, looked down. 20 police cars, 3 SWAT vans, and standing in the middle of it all, a man in an expensive suit with silver hair and the kind of face that probably looked great on corporate brochures. Gerald Whitmore, the man who'd built a military contracting company on the backs of men who'd fought for their country and then decided profit mattered more than principles. You've got 3 minutes to surrender, Whitmore continued. Send out the data you stole and nobody else has to die tonight. Boone grabbed a megaphone someone had found in an office, leaned out the window. We've got evidence of child trafficking, financial records, victim testimony, enough to put you and your wife in prison for the rest of your lives. His voice echoed across the street. You really want to kill 200 witnesses on camera with half the Nashville Police Department watching? A pause. Then Whitmore laughed. Actually laughed. Mr. Ryder, yes, I know who you are. You're a convicted felon. Your brothers are criminals. Drug dealers, thieves, men with records longer than their lives have been worth. Whitmore's voice was calm, reasonable. The voice of a man who'd already won. You break into a legitimate business, steal proprietary data, murder 6 security personnel, and now you're claiming you did it to expose child trafficking? He shook his head. Nobody's going to believe you. The FBI will see criminals desperate to justify murder. The media will see violent bikers terrorizing a corporation, and the courts will see defendants with 0 credibility. The words hit like hammer blows, because he was right. Everything they'd done tonight, the break-in, the shootout, the theft, could be spun as criminal violence by men with every reason to lie. And who would a jury believe? Respected corporate executives with clean records and expensive lawyers? Or outlaw bikers with felony convictions and blood on their hands? You can't win this, Whitmore called out. Even if you get out of this building alive, even if you manage to leak your so-called evidence, we'll bury you in litigation, defamation, slander, conspiracy. We have resources you can't imagine. And we will destroy you slowly, legally, publicly, until nobody remembers why you did this in the first place. Crow appeared at Boone's shoulder. He's stalling, buying time for reinforcements. I know. So what do we do? Boone looked at the data drives in Ledger's hand. 3 small pieces of plastic that contained enough evidence to topple a billion-dollar empire. If anyone believed it. If they could survive long enough to make people believe it. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Don't surrender. Don't negotiate. Hold position. Help is coming. Carson. The hell does that mean? Crow muttered. Before Boone could answer, the sound of rotor blades filled the air. Helicopters. 3 of them, coming in low over the Nashville skyline. Black, unmarked, the kind military used for extractions and raids. They descended toward the building's roof. Whitmore's voice over the bullhorn again, but this time with an edge of uncertainty. Who authorized air support? The lead helicopter touched down on the roof. Side door slid open. And out stepped a woman Boone recognized from exactly one photo he'd seen 3 days ago when they sent Eli into witness protection. Deputy Director Patricia Vance, FBI. But she wasn't alone. A dozen agents poured out behind her. Full tactical gear, FBI SWAT patches, weapons ready. Vance walked to the roof access door like she owned the building, kicked it open, called down the stairwell in a voice that carried authority like a weapon. Special Agent Patricia Vance, FBI. We have federal warrants for the arrest of Gerald and Patricia Whitmore on charges of child trafficking, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. Blackridge personnel, drop your weapons and disperse immediately or face federal charges. On the street below, Whitmore's face went from confident to calculating in the space of a heartbeat. "You can't be here," he shouted back. "I have authorization from—" "Your authorization is null, signed by a federal judge 2 hours ago after we received credible evidence from a protected witness." Vance's voice was ice. "And Mr. Whitmore, your wife is already in custody. We picked her up at your Franklin residence 30 minutes ago. She's singing like a canary about buyer lists and offshore accounts. So I suggest you make this easy on yourself." The Black Ridge operators looked at each other, looked at their boss, looked at the FBI helicopters and the SWAT team now rappelling down the side of the building, and slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Because mercenaries got paid to fight, they didn't get paid enough to go to war with the federal government. Vance descended from the roof with her team, met Boone on the 10th floor with an expression that was equal parts impressed and furious. "You couldn't wait for us to build a case properly? Had to turn downtown Nashville into a war zone? You were taking too long." Boone handed her the data drives. "Here, everything you need. Financial records, victim files, enough evidence to prosecute half the people involved in this conspiracy." Vance took the drives. "People died here tonight." "People were dying every day this operation continued." Boone's voice was flat. "At least the ones who died tonight died trying to stop it." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Get your people out of here. We'll handle the scene. And Boone, I don't want to see you or your brothers anywhere near this investigation going forward. You're material witnesses, nothing more. Let us do our jobs." "What about Eli? Is he safe?" "He's been safe since the moment he got in that car. New name, new family, new life 3,000 miles from here." Vance's expression softened slightly. "And he asked me to tell you something, said you'd want to know." "What?" "He said to tell Boone that promises kept don't always look the way you expect, but they still count." Boone felt something crack in his chest, because Eli was right. He'd promised to protect the boy, and he had. Just not the way he'd expected, not by keeping him close, by letting him go. "The other kids," Boone said, "the 47 victims Ledger identified. What happens to them?" "We find them, document their cases, build prosecutions, and hopefully give them back some of the childhood these monsters stole." Vance paused. "It's going to take years. There are victims across 17 states. Some of them have been with their buyers for so long they don't remember their real names. But we'll try, because that's what we do." "Not good enough." "It's all we have." Vance's voice was sympathetic but firm. "You can't save everyone, Boone. You're not that powerful. Nobody is." "Then why did 15 men die thinking we could?" Vance didn't have an answer for that. Neither did Boone. They evacuated the building in groups. Wounded first, then everyone else. The Nashville Metro had cordoned off the area, but they let the bikers through without arrests. Probably Vance's doing. Probably a deal cut behind scenes where evidence got suppressed and questions didn't get asked too loudly. By the time the sun came up over Nashville, 200 bikers were scattered across Tennessee, heading back to their chapters, their clubhouses, their normal lives of crime and brotherhood and pretending the world's darkness wasn't their problem. Except now, they knew it was. Boone, Crow, Ledger, Ghost, and Smoke met one last time in that garage outside Knoxville, exhausted, bleeding, hollow. "What now?" Ghost asked. Nobody answered for a long time. Finally, Crow spoke. "Now we bury our dead, we heal our wounded, and we try to figure out how to live with the fact that we went to war and aren't sure if we won." "We got the evidence," Ledger pointed out. "FBI has everything they need." "Evidence doesn't bring back the 15 brothers who died at that compound," Smoke said quietly. "Doesn't bring back the 3 who died tonight. Doesn't fix the 47 kids whose childhoods got stolen while we were too late to stop it. But it stops it from happening to more," Boone said. His voice was raw. "That's all we can do. Stop it from happening to more." Crow pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Cheap stuff. The kind they used to drink before they pretended to have standards. Poured 5 shots. "To the fallen," he said, raising his glass. "May they rest easier than we do." They drank. It burned going down. Everything burned now. Boone's phone rang one final time. Carson. "It's done," the agent said. "Both Whitmore's in custody. Their organization is being torn apart as we speak. Everyone involved is either arrested or running. You did it. Doesn't feel like victory. It never does. Carson's voice was tired. But Boone, that kid you saved, Eli, he's going to grow up. He's going to have a life. And someday when he's old enough to understand, he'll realize that a bunch of criminals he met one night decided his life was worth more than their own safety. That's victory, even if it doesn't feel like it. The line went dead. Boone stared at his phone, then at his brothers, at 4 men who looked like they'd aged a decade in 1 week. "We need to disappear for a while," Crow said. "Let this blow over. Let the feds do their jobs without us complicating things." "Where do we go?" "Anywhere but here." Crow stood, wincing from a wound in his side he hadn't told anyone about. "Roads are long. Country's big. We'll find somewhere to ride while the world forgets we exist." They mounted their bikes one last time, 5 men instead of 20. 5 survivors of a war nobody would write about, nobody would commemorate, nobody would remember except the people who'd lived it. Boone started his engine. The familiar rumble that had been his companion for 20 years. The sound that meant freedom, movement, escape from memories that didn't stay buried. But this time, when he rode out of that garage into the Tennessee morning, he wasn't running from memories. He was riding towards something else. Purpose, maybe. Redemption, possibly. Or just the quiet knowledge that for once in his wasted life, he'd done something that mattered. They hit the highway as the sun broke over the mountains. Chrome gleaming, leather cuts snapping in the wind. 5 men who'd lost everything and somehow found it again in protecting a kid who'd had nothing. Behind them, Nashville woke up to news reports about a major FBI operation. Child trafficking ring dismantled, dozens arrested, a corporate empire built on stolen childhoods collapsing in real time. And buried in the footnotes, barely mentioned, a group of outlaw bikers who'd been involved somehow, though details were unclear and probably would stay that way. Nobody would call them heroes. They wouldn't accept the title if offered. But somewhere in Oregon, an 8-year-old boy with a new name and a new life would grow up knowing that the most dangerous-looking people he'd ever met had been the safest. And maybe that was enough. Miles clicked past. Tennessee became Kentucky, became Ohio. The highway stretched ahead like a promise that healing might exist somewhere down the road if you rode far enough. But Boone knew better. Healing didn't exist for men like him. Only forward movement, only the next mile. Only the knowledge that when the world failed someone small and scared and desperate, the Iron Saints had been there, would always be there. Because that's what they were. Not heroes, not saviors, just broken men on motorcycles who'd decided that protecting kids was the one thing they couldn't fail at, even if it cost them everything, even if it killed them, even if the world never knew their names. The highway rolled on, and the Iron Saints disappeared into American mythology, outlaws and criminals and 1%ers who'd gone to war with a billion-dollar conspiracy and somehow won. Though winning felt a lot like losing when you counted the bodies. 6 months later, snow was falling on the Tennessee mountains like the world was trying to bury its sins under something clean. Boone sat in Molly's diner at 4 a.m, the same cracked vinyl booth where this had all started, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been made yesterday and reheated 3 times since. The neon sign outside still buzzed and flickered, casting red and blue shadows across empty tables, and a jukebox that still didn't work. Some things never changed. Other things changed so completely you barely recognized yourself in the mirror anymore. His phone sat on the table between his scarred hands. Silent. Had been silent for 3 days now. Before that, it had been ringing constantly. Journalists wanting the story, lawyers wanting depositions, FBI agents wanting clarification on testimony that contradicted official reports. He'd stopped answering 2 weeks ago. Let them figure it out themselves. The door opened. Cold air rushed in carrying the smell of snow and exhaust. Crow stepped inside, shaking ice from his leather cut, looking like he'd aged 10 years and 6 months. Maybe he had. Maybe they all had. "Figured I'd find you here," Crow said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Where else would I be?" "Somewhere warm. Somewhere the ghosts don't know how to find you." Crow gestured at Sarah behind the counter. She brought coffee without being asked. Knew what bikers needed it at 4 a.m. without them having to say it. They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable, Just the kind of quiet that came from men who'd been through hell together and didn't need words to communicate anymore. Finally, Crow spoke. Trial starts next week. Federal prosecutor called. Wants us to testify. I know. You gonna do it? I don't know. Boone stared into his coffee like it might have answers. It didn't. Every time I testify, I put a target on our backs. Every time we show up in court, we remind the people we destroyed that we're still breathing, that we're still out here. They're in prison. They can't touch us. They have friends, associates, people who profit from the same systems we tore down. Boone's voice was flat. Whitmore's lawyer already filed motions to suppress our testimony. Claims we're unreliable witnesses, violent criminals with grudges and fabricated evidence. Is it working? Prosecutor thinks he can overcome it, but it'll be close. Boone looked up. And if we lose, if the Whitmores walk because defense lawyers convinced a jury we're just criminals lying for attention, then 15 men died for nothing. Eli went into hiding for nothing. All of it was for nothing. Crow was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled something from his jacket, a letter. Envelope wrinkled and worn like it had been read a dozen times. This came to the clubhouse yesterday. No return address. Postmarked from Oregon, but the handwriting's too good to be an adult's. Boone's heart stopped. He took the letter with hands that shook slightly, opened it carefully like it might disintegrate if he wasn't gentle enough. Inside, a single page, lined notebook paper. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. The letters formed with the painstaking precision of a child who'd been taught that neatness mattered. Dear Boone, I'm not supposed to write this. Agent Vance said no contact for at least a year, but I needed you to know I'm okay. Better than okay. My new family is nice. They don't hurt me. They listen when I talk. They believe me when I tell them things. I started 4th grade. My teacher's name is Mrs. Rodriguez. She's kind. When I told her I liked writing, she gave me a journal. Not for documenting bad things, just for writing stories. Good stories about things I make up instead of things that happened. I wrote one about a biker who saved a kid. Mrs. Rodriguez said it was very good. She doesn't know it's true. I saw on the news about the trial, about the Whitmores getting arrested, about educational futures getting shut down. Agent Vance told me that 47 kids got found because of what we did. 47 kids who get to go home or get new homes or at least get away from the people who hurt them. That's because of you. Because of Crow and Ghost and Ledger and Smoke and all the brothers who fought. Because you believed me when nobody else did. Thank you for keeping your promise. I know it cost you everything. I know brothers died. I know you probably have nightmares about the compound and the building in Nashville and all the things that went wrong. But you saved me. And you saved 47 other kids. And even if the world never knows your names, even if history calls you criminals and outlaws and dangerous men, I'll always know the truth. You're heroes. The kind who ride motorcycles and smoke cigarettes and look scary enough that monsters think twice before coming after the people you protect. I'm gonna grow up now. Gonna build a good life. Gonna be someone you'd be proud of. And someday, when I'm old enough and strong enough and the danger's past, I'm gonna find you. Gonna shake your hand like a man and tell you face to face what I'm telling you now. You saved my life, and I'm gonna spend the rest of it making sure that sacrifice meant something. Your brother, Eli P.S. I gave my new mom and dad permission to tell Agent Vance where we live if you ever need to find me. Not now, but someday. When it's safe, because promises go both ways, and I promised I'd never forget you. Boone read the letter twice, then a third time, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. Kids got away with words, Crow said quietly. Yeah, Boone's voice was rough. He does. You gonna testify now? Yeah. Boone folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. Because if I don't, that kid's new life gets built on a foundation of criminals walking free, and I can't let that happen. Crow nodded. Then we ride to Nashville next week. Face whatever comes, and we make damn sure those bastards spend the rest of their lives in cages. What about the others? Ghost? Smoke? Ledger? Already committed. They'll be there. Crow's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. We started this together. We finish it together. The diner door opened again. This time it was Ghost, looking exhausted but alive. Behind him came Smoke, moving with the quiet grace of someone who'd learned to walk silently through hostile territory. And last was Ledger, carrying his laptop bag like it contained the secrets of the universe, which, in a way, it did. They slid into the booth and surrounding tables, turning Molly's diner into an impromptu war council at 4:30 in the morning. "Heard you finally got word from the kid," Ghost said to Boone. "How'd you know?" "Because you look less dead inside than you did yesterday." Ghost's smile was tired. "That's the closest thing to happy I've seen on your face in 6 months." "He's safe. That's all that matters." "Is it, though?" Smoke asked quietly. "Because 46 other kids are still out there. We found Eli's file, found the documentation. But the others?" He shook his head. "Some of them have been with their buyers for years. Some of them don't even know they were trafficked. They think their new families are legitimate." "FBI is working on it," Ledger said. "I've been consulting, helping them trace financial records, identify buyers, build cases. But it's slow. The network was so well hidden that unraveling it is like performing surgery with a chainsaw. You save some. You damage others just trying to help them." "How many have they recovered so far?" Crow asked. 12, out of 47 confirmed victims. Ledger's expression was grim. "And 3 of those 12 are so traumatized by the recovery process, armed agents showing up, their parents getting arrested, their entire lives revealed as lies, that they're in psychiatric facilities now. May never recover." The words sat heavy on the table, because that was the truth nobody wanted to talk about. Sometimes rescue looked like trauma. Sometimes saving people destroyed them in different ways. "What about the buyers?" Boone asked. "The people who purchased these kids?" 23 arrested so far. Doctors, lawyers, business executives. People who failed background checks because of criminal records or restraining orders or flags in the system that said they shouldn't be around children. Ledger pulled up files on his laptop. But here's the thing. Some of them didn't know. Didn't know the adoptions were illegal. Didn't know EFI was trafficking. They thought they were rescuing kids from bad situations through a private agency that helped people who couldn't adopt through traditional channels. "Ignorance isn't an excuse," Ghost said. "No, but it complicates things. Because do you prosecute a couple who paid $80,000 for a child they genuinely love and have been raising for 3 years? Do you tear that child away from the only parents they remember and put them back in the system?" Ledger's voice cracked. "There are no good answers, just terrible choices that destroy people no matter which way you go." Silence, because that was the other truth. They'd won the war, but the peace was just as brutal. Sarah brought more coffee, set down a plate of eggs and toast nobody had ordered. "On the house, you boys look like you need it." "Thanks, Sarah." Crow picked up a fork, stared at it, put it back down. "Your nephew, Jamie, did they find him?" Her face went pale. "Yeah, 3 weeks ago. He was with a family in Colorado. Couple named Morrison, school teachers. They'd adopted him legally, or so they thought 2 years ago through one of EFI's front agencies." She paused. "FBI showed up, arrested the Morrisons, took Jamie into protective custody. How's he doing?" "He's destroyed. Doesn't understand why the parents who loved him are in prison. Doesn't understand why his entire life was a lie. Doesn't remember anything about his biological mother because he was only 6 when he was taken." Her voice shook. "He keeps asking when he can go home, and nobody has the heart to tell him that home doesn't exist anymore." Boone felt like he'd been punched in the chest, because that was the cost of justice. For every Eli who got saved, there was a Jamie who got broken in different ways. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be. You did what needed doing. Just..." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Just know that sometimes doing the right thing still hurts everyone involved." She walked back to the counter. The bikers sat in silence, eating food that tasted like ash, drinking coffee that couldn't wash away the bitterness of incomplete victories. Finally, Ledger spoke. "There's something else. Something I found in the financial records that I haven't told the FBI yet." Everyone looked up. The Whitmores weren't the top. EFI was just one branch of a larger network. International. Connections to adoption agencies in Eastern Europe, Asia, South America. This wasn't just an American operation. It was global. He pulled up a network diagram that looked like a spider web spanning continents. And the money trail leads to a holding company in the Cayman Islands owned by people whose names I can't even pronounce. People with resources that make the Whitmores look like street-level hustlers. So we didn't win, Smoke said flatly. We just won one battle in a war that's still going. Yeah. Ledger closed his laptop. And I don't know how to fight people I can't even identify. People who operate in countries where American law doesn't reach. People who can make witnesses disappear across international borders. Then we don't fight them, Boone said. We do what we can. We testify. We put the Whitmores away. We help the FBI rescue as many kids as possible. And we accept that we can't save everyone. That's not good enough, Ghost said. It has to be. Boone's voice was tired. Because if we try to fight everyone, we'll lose. And if we lose, all of this was for nothing. Better to save some and survive than die trying to save all and accomplish neither. It was the most pragmatic thing Boone had ever said. It tasted like surrender. But it was also the truth. They left the diner as dawn broke over the mountains, pink and gold light spilling across snow-covered peaks. The kind of morning that made you believe the world could be beautiful if you ignored everything ugly hiding beneath the surface. 5 men on motorcycles. Leather cuts marked with patches that told stories of clubs, chapters, and crimes that society would never forgive. But they'd done something society couldn't. They'd believed a child when nobody else would. They'd fought a billion-dollar conspiracy with nothing but anger and determination. They'd lost brothers and bled and suffered and somehow, impossibly, won. At least partially. At least enough. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Federal courthouse in Nashville. Standing room only. Media circus outside with reporters shouting questions at anyone who looked important. The prosecution laid out its case with the methodical precision of people who'd spent 6 months building an unassailable argument. Financial records, victim testimony, recorded conversations, digital evidence that showed exactly how Educational Futures Incorporated had trafficked over 100 children in 6 years. The defense tried everything, attacked the credibility of witnesses, claimed the evidence was obtained illegally, argued that their clients were legitimate business people caught up in a witch hunt orchestrated by violent criminals with grudges. And for 3 weeks, Boone sat in that courtroom watching lawyers turn the suffering of children into legal arguments about admissibility and reasonable doubt. On day 18, they called him to the stand. State your name for the record. Boone Ryder. Mr. Ryder, could you tell the court about your criminal history? And there it was. The thing defense attorneys had been waiting for, permission to tear him apart. Dishonorable discharge from the Marine Corps, assault charges, multiple arrests, spent time in county jail for bar fights, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon that got pleaded down. Boone's voice was steady. I'm not a good man. Never claimed to be. So why should this jury believe anything you say? Because I don't have a reason to lie. I'm not getting paid. I'm not looking for fame. I just met a kid who needed help and decided his life mattered more than my comfort. Boone looked at the jury. You don't have to like me, you don't have to trust me, but you should trust the evidence, the financial records, the victim testimony, the 47 children whose files we recovered. All of that exists independent of what I am or who I've been. The defense attorney tried to interrupt. Boone kept talking. I know what I look like to you, criminal, outlaw, the kind of man you warn your kids about. And you're right, I am that man. But here's the thing about criminals. We know what systems look like when they're corrupt. We know what power looks like when it protects monsters instead of children. And we know what happens when legitimate authorities fail. His voice hardened. So yeah, I broke into that building. Yeah, I stole evidence. Yeah, I did things that aren't legal. But everything I did was in service of stopping something infinitely worse. And if that makes me a criminal in your eyes, then I'll wear that label proudly. The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney looked like he'd swallowed glass. And Boone walked off that stand knowing he'd done everything he could. The rest was up to 12 strangers who'd never met Eli, never seen the notebook, never had to choose between legal and right. On day 21, the jury came back. Guilty on all counts. Gerald Whitmore, 35 years federal prison. Patricia Whitmore, 40 years federal prison. No possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Families of victims crying, defense attorneys shouting objections, media scrambling to get statements, and in the back row, 5 bikers sat in silence, watching justice get served cold and clinical and nowhere near adequate for the crimes committed. But it was something. It was more than nothing. And for men who'd spent their lives watching the system fail, even partial justice felt like a miracle. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them with questions Boone didn't answer. Cameras flashed. Microphones got shoved in faces. They pushed through to their bikes, mounted up, started engines that roared like approval, and rode away from the circus without looking back. 3 months later, spring came to Tennessee with wildflowers and warm winds that smelled like hope. Boone was working on his bike in the clubhouse garage when Ghost appeared with his phone. "You're going to want to take this." "Who is it?" "Just take it." Boone wiped grease from his hands, took the phone. "Hello? Mr. Ryder?" A woman's voice, professional but kind. "This is Agent Vance. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Depends on what you're calling about." "I wanted to update you on the recovery efforts. We've now identified and recovered 31 of the 47 victims. It's slow work. Some of these kids are halfway around the world, but we're making progress." "That's good." Boone's chest felt tight. "What about the other 16? "Still looking, but Mr. Ryder, that's not why I called." A pause. "Eli asked me to reach out. He's doing well. Thriving, actually. Straight A student. Made the soccer team. His adoptive parents say he's the best thing that ever happened to their family. Tell him I'm glad." "I will. But there's more. He wanted me to ask you something." Another pause. "He wants to know if you'd be willing to meet him. Not now, but someday. When the danger's past and the appeals are exhausted and there's no risk of retaliation. He wants to thank you in person." Boone's throat closed up. "Yeah," he managed finally. "Yeah, I'd like that. I'll let him know." Vance's voice softened. "Mr. Ryder, I know testifying was difficult. I know you've paid a price for what you did. But I want you to know that in 20 years with the Bureau, I've never seen civilians do what you and your brothers did. You took on a billion-dollar conspiracy with nothing but anger and determination. And you won. That matters. We lost 15 men and saved 47 children. That's a ratio most people would take." She paused. "I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm not saying the cost wasn't brutal. But what you did mattered, and the kids you saved will carry that forward, will build lives that wouldn't have existed without you. That's legacy, Mr. Ryder, the kind that lasts." The call ended. Boone stood there in the garage holding Ghost's phone, covered in grease and sweat, and the accumulated weight of 6 months trying to figure out if they'd done the right thing. And for the first time since this started, he thought maybe they had. That night, the 5 surviving brothers of the inner circle met at Molly's diner one last time. Same booth where it all began. Same cracked vinyl and buzzing neon and coffee that tasted like it had been made in 1987. Sarah brought them food without asking what they wanted. They ate in silence for a while. Then Crow raised his coffee cup. "To the fallen, may they rest easier knowing what they died for." "To the fallen," they echoed. "To the survivors," Ghost added, "the 47 kids who got a second chance." "To the survivors." "To the future," Ledger said quietly, "whatever that looks like." "To the future." Boone was last. He looked around at these 4 men who'd become his family in ways blood never managed. Men who'd bled beside him, fought beside him, lost brothers beside him. "To redemption," he said finally. "For criminals who decided kids mattered more than comfort. For outlaws who became protectors. For broken men who somehow managed to do something right. To redemption." They drank coffee that tasted terrible and felt perfect. Because that's what Brotherhood was. Not blood, not obligation, just the quiet knowledge that when the world failed someone vulnerable, you didn't get to look away and pretend it wasn't your problem. You rode into the darkness. You fought the monsters. And you carried the scars forever after as proof that you'd been there when it mattered. Outside, their motorcycles sat in a row under the flickering neon. Chrome gleaming in the Tennessee night, leather cuts hanging heavy with memories of battles fought and brothers lost. The highway stretched ahead like it always did, infinite, unforgiving. full of people who needed help and systems that failed them. And somewhere on that highway, 5 men would ride tomorrow and the day after and every day following, carrying the weight of incomplete victories and the knowledge that saving everyone was impossible. But saving some was enough. Had to be enough. Because the alternative was giving up. And men like the Iron Saints didn't know how to do that. 3 years later, on a cold December morning, Boone got a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Portland, Oregon. The handwriting was older now, more confident, but still careful in the way that suggested the writer knew words mattered. Dear Boone, I'm 11 now. Almost 12. Agent Vance says it's safe to write again. Says the appeals are done and the Whitmores are never getting out and the people who wanted revenge have moved on to easier targets. I wanted you to know I'm still doing good. Better than good. I made honor roll 3 years running. I'm on the debate team. My parents, my real parents, the ones who chose me, are proud. They tell me that every day. I told them about you last year. About the notebook and the diner and the bikers who saved me. They didn't believe me at first. Then Agent Vance confirmed it, showed them the court transcripts and newspaper articles and everything. My dad cried. Said he couldn't imagine how much courage it took to walk into a diner at midnight and ask a stranger for help. Said most adults couldn't do that. My mom wants to meet you, wants to thank you in person for giving her a son. So I'm asking again, will you come? Will you let me introduce you to the family you made possible? It doesn't have to be soon, whenever you're ready, but I need you to know that the promise goes both ways. You promise not to leave me. I'm promising not to forget you. Your brother forever, Eli Morrison. P.S. I'm writing a book, a true story about a kid who got saved by the most dangerous-looking people in the world. My English teacher says it's really good, says it might get published someday. I told her I'm not doing it for publication. I'm doing it so people know that heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like criminals on motorcycles. And that's okay, because what matters isn't what you look like. It's what you do when nobody's watching. Boone read the letter in the clubhouse garage while snow fell outside. Read it twice, then 3 times. And then he walked to his bike, started it despite the cold, and rode to Molly's diner because some decisions required coffee and the place where everything started. Crow was already there. So were Ghost and Smoke and Ledger. Like they'd known he'd come. Like they'd been waiting. Boone slid into the booth, put the letter on the table. Kid wants to meet. So go meet him, Crow said simply. It's 3,000 miles. So? We've got nothing but time and highway. Crow's scarred face split into something that might have been a smile. Besides, I've always wanted to see Oregon. Here it's pretty. This is crazy. We're not his family. We're the men who saved his life, Ghost interrupted. That makes us family, blood or not. He's got real parents now, people who chose him, people who can give him everything we can't, and he still wants to meet us, Ledger pointed out, because we're part of his story, part of who he survived to become. You don't get to decide that doesn't matter. Boone looked around at his brothers, at men who'd lost everything fighting for one kid they barely knew, and he realized they were right. This wasn't about them. It was about Eli, about keeping a promise, about showing a kid who'd been failed by every legitimate authority that the dangerous men who'd saved him hadn't forgotten. All right, Boone said quietly. We ride to Oregon. They left the next morning as the sun came up over Tennessee, 5 men on motorcycles carrying minimal gear and maximum scars. The highway stretched ahead like a promise. 3,000 miles of asphalt between them, and a kid who'd trusted them with his life. They rode through winter storms and midnight cold, through states that blurred together into an endless ribbon of concrete and white lines, through small towns and big cities where people stared at the bikers and saw exactly what society had taught them to see: criminals, outlaws, men to avoid. And Boone smiled every time, because let them think that. Let the world believe dangerous men were always threats. It just meant when kids needed protection, they'd know who to trust. Portland, Oregon looked nothing like Tennessee. Rain instead of snow. Mountains that touched clouds. A city that felt more progressive and clean than anywhere Boone had ever been. They met Eli and his family at a park overlooking the Columbia River. Agent Vance had arranged it. Neutral ground with FBI presence nearby just in case. Boone saw the kid first. 11 years old now. Taller, stronger. But the eyes were the same, old and wise and permanently marked by things no child should know. Eli saw them, saw 5 men in leather cuts with patches that marked them as criminals, and he ran, straight at Boone, arms outstretched, no fear, no hesitation, just trust. Boone caught him, pulled him into a hug that felt like absolution for every failure, every loss, every brother who died making this moment possible. "You came," Eli whispered. "I knew you would. Told you I keep my promises." "Yeah, you did." Eli's parents approached slowly, a couple in their 40s. The mom had kind eyes and nervous hands. The dad looked like he didn't know whether to thank the bikers or call for backup. "Mr. Ryder?" The mom's voice shook. "I'm Rebecca Morrison. This is my husband, David. We wanted to thank you for—" Her voice broke. "For giving us our son." "You don't owe us thanks," Boone said quietly. "We did what anyone should have done." "But nobody else did," David said. His voice was firm. "Nobody else believed him. Nobody else fought for him. You did. And we owe you everything." They spent 3 hours in that park talking, not about the violence or the deaths or the trauma, just about Eli, about his life now, his grades, his friends, his dreams of being a writer someday and telling stories that mattered. And as the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in colors that had no right to be that beautiful, Boone realized something. They hadn't failed, hadn't lost. They'd won in the way that mattered most. This kid was alive, was safe, was loved, and 46 others had been given the same chance because 5 criminals decided the law mattered less than justice. As they prepared to leave, Eli pulled Boone aside one last time. "Thank you," the boy said quietly, "for believing me when nobody else would, for keeping your promise, for being the kind of hero who doesn't look like one. I'm not a hero, kid. Never was." "Yes, you are. You just don't know it yet." Eli smiled, small and wise and too old for 11. "But someday you will. Someday you'll look back and realize that the bravest thing you ever did was decide one kid's life was worth more than your own safety. And you'll understand that's what heroes do." Boone didn't have words for that, so he just hugged the kid one more time, and then he walked back to his brothers, to men who'd lost everything and found redemption in the most unlikely place. They mounted their bikes as stars began to appear. "Where to now?" Crow asked. Boone looked at the highway stretching ahead, infinite, unforgiving, full of people who needed help. "Wherever the road takes us," he said finally, "because there's always another kid, always another fight, always another reason to keep riding." They started their engines. The Harleys roared to life in perfect unison, and 5 men who'd been written off by society as too broken, too dangerous, too criminal to ever do anything worthwhile rode off into the American night. Not heroes, not saviors, just outlaws on motorcycles who'd decided that protecting kids was the one thing they couldn't fail at. Even if the world never knew their names, even if history forgot they existed, even if the only people who remembered were the children they'd saved and the brothers they'd lost along the way. The highway rolled on forever, and the Iron Saints disappeared into mythology. Criminals and outlaws and 1%ers who'd gone to war with darkness and somehow won. Not because they were stronger, not because they were better, but because when a kid asked for help at midnight in a forgotten Tennessee diner, they'd said yes. And that yes had changed everything. Behind them, Portland's lights faded into distance. Ahead, the road stretched infinite. And somewhere between the two, 5 broken men found the only kind of redemption that mattered. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just the quiet knowledge that when the world failed someone small and scared and desperate, they'd been there, would always be there. Because that's what brothers did. Protected the vulnerable, fought the monsters, and carried the scars as proof they'd lived a life that meant something. The engines roared, the night swallowed them whole, and the legend of the Iron Saints, outlaws who saved children, criminals who fought trafficking, dangerous men who were somehow the safest people in the world, lived on in whispered stories and late-night conversations, and the grateful hearts of families who knew that sometimes angels rode Harleys, sometimes heroes wore leather, and sometimes the most dangerous-looking people were exactly who you needed when the world stopped caring. The end. Years from now, Eli Morrison would publish a book titled Brothers on Steel, How Outlaws Saved My Life. It would become a bestseller, would spark national conversations about child trafficking, corruption, and the difference between law and justice. And on the dedication page, in careful handwriting that still showed traces of the third grader who'd walked through rain to ask strangers for help, would be 5 names: Boone, Crow, Ghost, Ledger, Smoke. The Iron Saints who'd decided one kid's life was worth everything. And in dive bars and clubhouses and roadside diners across America, bikers would read that book and know that sometimes the Brotherhood wasn't about crime or territory or colors. Sometimes it was about the kids nobody else protected, the vulnerable nobody else fought for, the forgotten nobody else remembered, and that was enough. Would always be enough. Because outlaws who saved children weren't criminals. They were family. And family meant you showed up, you fought, you bled, and you never ever stopped riding until everyone was safe, no matter how long it took, no matter what it cost, no matter who forgot your name. The road was endless. But so was the Brotherhood. And somewhere on that highway, 5 men kept riding, kept protecting, kept proving that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world were exactly what you needed when everything else failed.